Ian Tyrone was one of the three dukes who wielded the greatest influence in the state. As the emperor's cousin, he had not only great fame, but also an impressive fortune. He was considered the nation's eunuch, a man spoken of with both fear and respect. Olivia Florence did not want to repeat the same mistakes in her second life and get involved with James again. In this life, having thought everything over carefully, she was sure that Duke Tyrone was the best fit for her. Turning to the Duke, Olivia noticed that he mistook her for the Duchess of Parnell, which surprised her. However, she quickly corrected him, explaining that he was mistaken because she was Olivia Florence, not a duchess, and she added that he should address her exclusively as Mrs. Florence. Olivia didn't attach any importance to the fact that he was a eunuch. On the contrary, she even thought that it could be a plus. The Duke asked again with obvious surprise if she was the woman who had been married to James Parnell. But to her, James Parnell was just trash that she didn't want to see anymore. He left her to go to war, and there has been no news from him for 10 years. According to the current law, if the wedding night did not take place, then such a marriage was considered invalid. Olivia never even saw her husband's face. He disappeared before they could meet. The Duke looked at her in surprise, but she smiled calmly and said that she now considered herself Florence. After these words, he only sighed, admitting that her frankness sounded rather impudent. Then he asked her directly why she had decided to meet him today. What was the reason for this visit? Olivia asked if he had heard the song that was now so popular among the common people on the streets of the capital. At that moment, the Duke realized that he was talking about the very song that hinted that they had committed adultery. It was really unexpected and quite frank on his part, so Olivia Florence couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed by such directness. She later noted that the song gave her a certain unpleasant feeling, which left her confused and slightly embarrassed. All this happened because Duke Ian Tyrone had to take full responsibility for what happened and act with dignity. He wondered in surprise how exactly he could take on such responsibility and wondered if he was really capable of answering for everything. Then Mrs. Olivia looked at the Duke with a slight smile and calmly said that, in her opinion, he was simply obliged to marry her. A few months ago, Olivia suddenly opened her eyes and realized that it was too late to change or fix anything. At that very moment, she felt with alarm that her back was hurting badly, as if from a long sleep or some old injury. And at the same time, she was surprised where she suddenly got such extraordinary lightness and freedom in her whole body. It was in this house, within these walls, that she lived immediately after her wedding with James Parnell 20 years ago. The room she was in seemed to her the same as it had 20 years ago, as if time had turned back. First of all, she decided to start preparing for the celebration of her upcoming birthday. After that, she pulled the special rope near the bed to call the maid to run errands. However, the maid did not appear for a long time, which irritated Olivia and caused her to become increasingly dissatisfied. She even thought that she would gladly order all the maids to be flogged for such slowness and disobedience. Olivia came out of her room and in a menacing voice loudly called for Masha to come over immediately. The maid ran quickly to her, justifying herself by saying that she was in a hurry but did not manage to arrive on time. Olivia asked her why the lady had called her, since she did not understand what exactly her fault was. In response, Olivia sharply asked why no one came after her call, as if she had simply been ignored. It was at this moment that she noticed that Masha looked suspiciously young, as if she was no more than 20 again. She grabbed the maid's hand and thought that she looked exactly the same as the day she first became her maid. It seems like Olivia has been feeling really out of sorts lately, like her head is all messed up, so she smiled weakly and said that she was probably just too tired from preparing and asked for strong mint tea. Masha asked again with bewildered surprise whether she really had to do this, as if she couldn't believe her ears and didn't understand where all this was leading. Mrs. Parnell was at a loss to understand who else, but Olivia should bring her tea at such moments, since no one else in the house did this. It was clear from Olivia's face that she had never done anything like this before, and was not used to carrying out such tasks personally. At that moment, she suddenly heard someone screaming. Someone was asking irritably why she was making noise early in the morning and not letting others get enough sleep. That voice was etched into her memory. She knew it too well and was sure that she would never be able to forget it, even if she wanted to. It was the voice of Olivia's first mother-in-law, who had died 10 years ago, and her appearance seemed impossible, almost frightening. Before her stood an elegant yet caustic and rude woman, Rose Parnell, her first mother-in-law, who always knew how to sting. Rose asked with a contemptuous smile who it was that Olivia called mother, since she had long ago strictly ordered that she be called exclusively Mrs. Parnell. Another woman approached them clearly irritated and asked who had been making such noise since early morning, not allowing them to rest peacefully. The new guest, a blonde with a heavy look, clearly had a headache and was even more irritated than the first one. This was Olivia's second mother-in-law, a grumpy, sullen, and spiteful woman who never missed an opportunity to criticize everything. Since both of these mothers-in-law had appeared, Olivia realized that there had to be a third one. It simply couldn't be any other way. Soon the third mother-in-law actually appeared, shouting and cursing. She cursed everyone in a row, not distinguishing who was standing in front of her. This woman loudly declared that if anyone else dared to yell, she would either hurt him very badly or simply kill him. Uncouth and rude to the extreme, the third mother-in-law drove Olivia crazy, and she was already beginning to lose her composure. Up until this point, Olivia had tried to deny everything, hoping that it was a dream, but now she could only come to terms with reality. She was in her second room, the one where she had once spent her youth, and where now everything around was painfully familiar. And these three, all her mothers-in-law alive and nearby, as if nothing had happened, it seemed as if she had really returned to her 20s. Shortly before returning in time, Duke James Parnell entered this very room and saw his wife sitting in a mourning black dress. James was covered in blood, and Olivia, or rather Mrs. Parnell, was completely surprised to see him, especially in such a state. Now, in the present tense, she was again sitting in front of her mother-in-law as she once had, and she felt the same tension. The mother-in-law noted that Olivia seemed to have never been taught etiquette lessons. Otherwise, how could such behavior be explained? Apparently, she will continue to be distracted, daydreaming and thinking about something of her own, even when in front of adults and important people. And again, Olivia called her mother, and this finally drove her mother-in-law crazy. She became furious, especially in the midst of preparations for the holiday, and therefore demanded tea with mint. Olivia again began to insist that no one dare call her mother anymore. She ordered that everyone address her exclusively as Mrs. Parnell without exception. Olivia then added that since that was the case, she should be treated as she should be, with the respect worthy of the title of Duchess of Parnell, whom she now represented. After these words, one of the mothers-in-law even asked again if she had heard wrong, because she did not expect such directness and could not believe that Olivia had actually said this. Then Olivia firmly stated that she was now the full owner of this house, and that she would make all decisions regardless of anyone else's opinions. And since James Parnell, her husband and Duke, is currently away at war, she acts on his behalf as his wife and temporary head of their house. Despite this, none of the mothers-in-law show her even a shadow of respect, even though she is now in charge, and all they do is demand that Olivia honor them. One of the mothers-in-law was so shocked that she could not even find words. It seemed to her that Olivia's behavior was simply unthinkable, but for Olivia herself, all this came as an unexpected relief. The third mother-in-law was furious and shocked that Olivia allowed herself to call their son simply by his name, and not as a duke, as if she had forgotten about his title. But Olivia didn't understand what the problem was, because he was her husband, and if anyone could call him that, it was only she with every right and respect to do so. Suddenly, the mother-in-law grabbed a chair and threw it towards Olivia, shouting something offensive at her. She called her a stupid fool while not holding back her emotions. The third mother-in-law angrily said that because of their constant shouting, her ears were already ringing, and she asked for at least a little silence in this house. With every shout, it seemed to her as if they all hated her, and the atmosphere became more and more tense, as if they were no longer a family, but warring parties. Although the mothers-in-law are already over 40, they are all like Olivia's peers, but it is she who behaves with restraint unlike them, capricious and hot-tempered women. Then, Olivia said that the third mother-in-law could eat alone if she was so uncomfortable being in company. No one was bothering her, but she wasn't obliged to listen to whining either. That mother-in-law was surprised by such an attitude, and Olivia noted that if she was no longer 15, then she could behave more maturely. Not whine, but speak directly. The mother-in-law even started crying and asked with a trembling voice if Olivia really meant all this, and said seriously if she was joking. Then another of the mothers-in-law said that Olivia must be completely mad to allow herself to speak like that in this house where everything had been different before. But Olivia just sighed and said that there was nothing strange about it. Something like this was bound to happen sooner or later, and she was not going to remain silent any longer. Now, while the Duke is away, she acts on behalf of the head of the family, and no one has the right to take this position away from her, no matter how much they would like otherwise. Besides, her status is higher than all of them, and so she asks to be respected as a duchess and not treated as an outsider. And to begin with, they must hand over to her complete management of all family finances, because that is the order of things in the temporary absence of the Duke. But one of the mothers-in-law, hearing this, only snorted and said that all this was complete nonsense, and she did not understand where Olivia got such stupidity from. Another mother-in-law remarked mockingly that a simpleton like Olivia would never be able to understand even the basic financial affairs of the duchy. Olivia calmly reminded them that none of them knew what specialization she had studied at the academy, since in fact she had been studying accounting and bookkeeping. That was why Olivia confidently stated that she did not need their permission at all to begin working with the duchy's finances. After this, she called the butler to convey to him a short but clear message that left no doubt about her determination. Olivia then ordered that all documents related to the Duke's affairs be immediately transferred directly to her room. In addition, she demanded that a spacious and bright room be prepared for her where she could work calmly and effectively. The mother-in-law, flushed with rage, looked angrily at the butler and slammed her palm on the table, expressing her indignation. She threatened that if he dared to carry out this order, she would not leave it so easily and would definitely take revenge. This is where the mother-in-law's true colors showed up: tough, vengeful, and unable to accept someone else's will. Olivia turned to the butler and reminded him that he should think about which of them would stay in this house for a long time and whom he would serve. The butler bowed low, expressed his respect, and said that on such an important matter, he preferred to address the master directly. The second mother-in-law added indignantly that their son was currently fighting in the war, and there was no point in disturbing him with unnecessary correspondence. However, the first mother-in-law with caviar intervened and noted that in her opinion, there was still some common sense and something right in this. They were confident that only they could send the letter and convey the necessary information first, without anyone's interference. But Olivia was not going to give in. She also decided to send her letter, and had already sat down to start writing it. At the military barracks, Olivia composed a letter in which she addressed James Parnell with tenderness, calling him her darling. He stepped out of the shower, not expecting anything special, and was shocked to see a letter written in his wife's handwriting in front of him. In the letter, Olivia apologized for writing so suddenly, and especially for raising topics related to household chores. She said that her position in the house was almost like that of a maid. She was completely excluded from all affairs and locked in a cramped closet. She asked James to entrust her with the management of all internal affairs, because only then would she be able to put everything in order. Olivia decided that she would take full responsibility, cope with any difficulties, and double her fortune by the time James returned home. She sincerely hopes that James will support her, not because of greed for wealth, but because he understands the importance of their common future. Her hope is based on the dream of a calm, happy, and prosperous family life, where they can be one. That is why she added at the end of the letter words of sincere desire for his speedy return, signed and sealed the envelope. When in the vicinity of the Duke of Parnell, one could notice 3 women at once, all of whom were distinguished by their extremely rude and unpleasant behavior. The first was the arrogant mother-in-law, who complained all the time about headaches and acted as if everyone around her owed her something. The second is James's biological mother, full of ignorance and rudeness, who did not hold back in her expressions or insults. The third one is refined and powerful, having taken a leading position in the family, thanks to intrigues and constant manipulation. It was for this reason that, having married the Duke in the hope of giving birth to an heir, Olivia unexpectedly found herself the owner of 3 mothers-in-law at once. This was her second life, and from that moment on, she decided that when she returned to her 20s, she would start a small rebellion against fate. First of all, Olivia took on the family's financial affairs, which had fallen into complete disarray due to her first mother-in-law and her extravagance. Everything she does is aimed at protecting her home and her own freedom so that no one else can decide for her. And every time she thinks about it, she gets a satisfied smile. That's why she looks so happy now. After morning exercises, the butler approached Olivia and told her important news. A reply had finally arrived from the Duke of Parnell. Alina, who was unpacking something at that moment, was pleasantly surprised that the letter had been delivered after all, and hurried to open it. But after reading it, she was very disappointed because the content of the letter was not at all what she expected and wanted. In a fit of anger, Olivia crumpled and tore up the letter, then screamed, calling James a son of a bitch, not hiding her anger. Exhausted, she fell to the floor, and only then did she realize how naive she had been to believe that everything would change according to her wishes. Even though this is her second life, Olivia has realized that hoping that everything will go easy was her biggest mistake. James has always been like this, and the fact that he doesn't take her side is unlikely to ever change, no matter how much she wants it to. Everything that happened was a complete collapse for her, a real fucking failure from which she just wanted to disappear. A couple of days later, she woke up early in the morning from the cold. Her body was shivering as if she was lying in an ice cave without shelter. She wrapped herself in a blanket, but it looked as if her body was slowly fading away like a person on the verge of death. The price for failure in this life was too high, much higher than she had expected when making past decisions. After this defeat, those around her began to treat her as useless and unwanted, as if she were an empty space. Olivia had always been frivolous, even though she had been told more than once that it was time to be smarter. She remembered how she had been advised to seek allies, but she had ignored them all. She found it hard to believe that she would now have to live with such a terrible man as James Parnell, and she didn't even want to think about it. She felt so sick. Olivia took a piece of bread just to distract herself, but she had no appetite. In a fit of anger, she threw it at the wall and did not even look where it fell. Suddenly, the door swung open, and the third mother-in-law appeared on the threshold. The girl did not expect her arrival, and was so surprised that she could not even say anything right away. Olivia immediately understood why this woman, the Duke's biological mother, had suddenly decided to visit her at this moment. She immediately got down to business and stated that she could not understand how such a useless and lazy girl like Olivia could exist. She said that everyone was already tired, working plowing without rest, and Olivia was just lying around sleeping and doing nothing for the family. Her mother-in-law added that James would kick her out immediately if she didn't change, and Olivia realized that her entire future was at stake. These words made her furious, and Olivia sharply asked her mother-in-law what she was even talking about and where she got all this from. But then, in the silence, Olivia finally thought about it. Maybe she really shouldn't go down the same path a second time, marrying James. The mother-in-law did not understand why Olivia suddenly became silent and stopped arguing. It was not like her at all. Suddenly, the girl came up to her, took her hand, and said that her mother-in-law turned out to be a genius. This was exactly the reaction she was expecting. She was even a little confused, not understanding what this strange phrase was about, and was slightly agitated by the surprise. The thought was already ringing in Olivia's head that James Parnell was the end for her. For both of them, there was no turning back. However, she has not yet figured out how exactly to file for divorce, because everything in her life has become too confusing. The Duke's family served the emperor and the state for almost 100 years, never breaking their oath or dishonoring the honor of the family. But now, in this supposedly great and prosperous family, only James remains, and even he is no longer a hope. All they needed was a pretext to send him to war, and marriage was an excellent cover for that purpose. The emperor decided that if James could not be sent away without a wife, then let him marry. The problem was solved quickly and without emotion, so they chose Olivia as their bride. Not out of love, not out of desire, but simply because it was necessary to be formal. The only argument was that they had the same birthday with James and nothing else in common. Olivia had absolutely no idea how she could now break these unnecessary and meaningless marriage bonds. Perhaps it would be worthwhile to talk to His Majesty to cry and evoke pity, as many do, or even to say that it is impossible to live with James, because he is supposedly incapable as a man. But the truth was that James was not at all like she sometimes thought he was, and it was confusing. On the contrary, in their intimate life, everything was even too good with him. But after the defeat, he began to treat her terribly. If you think back, the emperor did have a cousin, and he had a very unpleasant and strange problem that was the subject of gossip. The lady ordered Olivia Florenz to be extremely careful with this new person, but she just waved it off, saying that everything was perfectly fine. Suddenly, a strange man pushed Olivia hard, causing her to stagger, and the crystal glass to slip out of her hand, shattering into pieces. The man looked at her and said that she should be more careful in such crowded places so that something like this does not happen again. He added that he hoped she was okay, and even took her hand, as if wanting to make sure of it himself. It turned out that this man was Jan himself, Duke of Tyrone, known throughout the empire by name and rank. However, Olivia did not understand at all why it was Duke Tyrone who was in her way at that very moment. On the other hand, she thought that this could be a convenient chance to get to know him and get closer. So she said she suddenly felt dizzy and took a step and literally fell right onto his chest. Olivia asked him to hug her tightly, as if she was his golden lover, with whom he had spent a passionate night. Everyone around became curious about this scene, and no one could believe that there could be any real relationship between them. Those who were a little further away even rose up on their toes to get a better look at what was happening in front of them. Mr. Yang was a little taken aback and wondered if he really had the right to hug her like this right now. Everyone present stared at him, not taking their eyes off him, and began to think that he was indeed a true righteous man. From that very day on, he was given the nickname, the Eunuch of the Nation, which was then heard in almost every corner. But Olivia Florence had no one left who could be a suitable candidate for remarriage. Now she had to think hard about how to persuade this cold and unfeeling duke to agree to the marriage. He was beginning to irritate her, and one day, as she was walking down the corridor, she heard someone nearby quietly humming. Olivia realized that it was a simple maid singing clearly, unaware that important people could hear her. The song was so popular that it was sung even in the most remote corners of the empire. For this reason, street bards began to earn quite well by entertaining the public with songs. Most often, they included gossip and speculation about the lives of famous people of the empire in their songs. These songs were liked by almost all the inhabitants of the empire, regardless of their position or age. That is why street bards continued to make good money from their performances. That's right! She just needs to write her own song to get more attention. The lyrics must contain touching words about love for the song to become a real hit. And after just a couple of days, children all over the area began to sing that the Duke of Parnell's wife had not left him alone. And then the song went on to say that Olivia opened the window every night to let in the fresh air and dreams of the past. After that, she carefully checked to see if anyone was standing at the window, hiding in the darkness, and watching her from the shadows. The song also included words about Olivia waiting for a secret in her lover, who keeps the flame of unquenchable hope in his heart. Romeo asked the butler if he had sent the letter to Olivia, and he confirmed that it had already been sent to its addressee. He had no idea that Olivia was living in anticipation and was mentally turning only to him despite everything around her. Romeo did exactly as she asked, without unnecessary questions or doubts, trusting her words. But he was still worried that there could be serious consequences from this, and that was exactly what Olivia expected from him. He is the man who will soon ascend to the throne, and now he decides all matters in a completely different way, with cold confidence. Romeo Alcagers is Olivia's best friend, the future ruler, and the song was a huge success, thanks to the bards sponsored by the wealthy Duke Alcagers. It took a week to write the song, but after that word spread like wildfire so soon, there wasn't a single person left who hadn't heard of it. It seems that Olivia really does have a talent for songwriting, and it has become her unexpected but powerful weapon. If everything goes well, perhaps she should compose more, because her husband is a stupid shadow, and her mothers-in-law are stupid hens who do not understand her. She wrote to Romeo not to worry, because that was exactly what she wanted, for everything to be exactly as it was happening now. Olivia also said that here in this place, there is a real hell, and she has to face difficulties that are difficult to endure. Divorce is not the worst option for her, but on the contrary, the best one, which opens up new opportunities and freedom. She was very grateful to Romeo for his help, and wrote about it in her letter, expressing her gratitude and hope. Now they await action from John. a determined and influential duke who must intervene and change the course of events. 4 days later, the third mother-in-law began yelling at Olivia, calling her Gabriella, accusing her of incomprehensible behavior and unacceptable songs that were circulating on the streets. Olivia was very tired, did not want to listen to these reproaches. She was cold and lonely in her soul, despite those around her. She replied that her mother-in-law had no idea what she was talking about and that her words had no meaning to her. Olivia noticed that her mother-in-law knew very well that lately she had been really wanting privacy and peace in her room. The mother-in-law, of course, agreed with Olivia, but she still did not understand why she was so angry, although she advised her to calm down. The mother-in-law began to shout even louder, accusing Olivia of thinking that everything could be easily settled here and of calling the name of her golden son a dirty word. Olivia didn't understand at all how all this could concern her personally and why she was being drawn into this conflict. She decided to find out what really happened since her mother-in-law was so agitated and could not calm down. The mother-in-law was silent at first, and even a little embarrassed, but she still began to tell the story. She said that today, everyone who started drinking talked about nothing but what happened. The conversation touched on those very unpleasant rumors that quickly spread among people. However, Olivia did not fully understand what exactly was being discussed and why it was so important for everyone. The girls were a little embarrassed and hesitated whether to talk about it, but eventually decided to tell. They reported that there was talk that her daughter-in-law allegedly had some kind of connection with Duke Ian Tyrone. Olivia was shocked by such words and could not believe that such gossip had already managed to spread. She insisted that this was extremely inconvenient for the Duke, but her mother-in-law shouting asked why she was even talking about it. The mother-in-law did not understand how her son should cope with all this mess around, because it was a big problem for the family. She claimed that her son was completely dedicated to the war and received no support from Olivia, and now he was also branded with this. Olivia responded that it was the country that imposed this situation and had a hand in everything, and it was not her fault. She added that she had always been there for and supported her husband, and could not understand where these rumors could have come from. In any case, Olivia needs to meet with him urgently to clarify everything in person and close this topic. She just received a letter from the Duke inviting her to a meeting today at 3 p.m. It is clear that he has no doubts at all. He is ready to talk and wants to sort out the situation. Aramir is the famous tea capital, a place with a special atmosphere and ideal for such things. For Yana, this is the best place to dispel unpleasant rumors and restore her reputation. Despite the complexity of the situation, she was determined and seriously worried about everything that was happening. He said that this issue had already been discussed at the meeting, and so far no one understands what to do next. Olivia didn't even realize that there could be anything more grueling than reliving 20 years of excruciating hell full of pain, betrayal, and humiliation. Therefore, at any cost, she needed to convince Duke Ian Tyrone to change the course of fate and not repeat old mistakes. The butler reported that the note addressed to the Duchess had already been delivered as ordered. Ian Tyrone nodded slightly in acknowledgement and smiled back, showing that he appreciated his promptness. The servants watching the carriage arrive immediately noticed the Duke of Parnell's insignia on its side and exchanged glances. They realized that the guest who had arrived was most likely the very same Duchess about whom persistent rumors had been circulating lately. Olivia stepped out of the carriage slowly and calmly looked around at the people around her, showing neither excitement nor confusion. She already had a lot of experience in similar situations, so she was confident that everything would go as she needed. Behind her back, people called Olivia arrogant and thought that she had no idea how to behave in public. However, even such an unpleasant and challenging experience sometimes became useful in the games of power and survival. One of the employees of the establishment approached Olivia and asked if she had made a reservation for a table in advance. She said confidently that the reservation should be made in the name of Duke Ian Tyrone without adding any unnecessary words. The man immediately understood everything, nodded, and politely gestured for them to follow him into the depths of the hall without asking any additional questions. The space of the hall was impressive. The choice of tables, their arrangement, and decoration seemed truly exquisite. The gentleman who escorted her indicated exactly where the Duchess should go, doing so in the most respectful manner. Olivia realized that the Duke had not yet arrived and felt a slight irritation at his lateness. It seemed to her that Jan deliberately wanted to draw her into some kind of moral battle or game of endurance. She decided to find out how much tea cost in this establishment in order to distract herself and occupy herself with something. The servant did not immediately understand her question and asked again, but Olivia repeated her request, trying not to get irritated. After this, she sharply demanded that she not be forced to voice the request a third time. The guy quickly bowed and said that the menu featured 6 carefully selected types of tea from the master. He also added that he would bring a menu so that she could see the entire offering for herself. The lady nodded approvingly, noting that this was a wonderful idea, and sat down at the table while the servant still looked confused. The atmosphere of the establishment was striking in its luxury, and Olivia decided not to miss the moment. To enjoy real tea to the fullest, she ordered fruit tea to be brought to her, thinking that she wanted something light and aromatic. She also asked to add flower petals to the drink to make the taste more refined. After that, as if remembering something important, she also ordered pu'er, known for its rich taste. Olivia now knew exactly what it meant to truly enjoy a good cup of tea in private. After tea, she called the administrator and noticed that the Duke had finally entered the hall. She was surprised by his appearance and a little upset as she expected that he would not come at all. Here he finally showed up, and Olivia felt mixed emotions: irritation, relief, and discontent. She already knew a lot about him, but she didn't think that Ian Tyrone could be so rude in his treatment. He smiled faintly and asked with studied ease if Olivia Florence was really now the Duchess of Parnell, not hiding his surprise. 3 days ago, a maid suddenly appeared in the Duke's chambers unexpectedly, and her presence immediately aroused the suspicions of all the servants. Immediately after this, he approached the massive door and solemnly informed His Highness the Emperor that Duke Jan Tyrone had arrived at the castle. The Emperor felt as if he was pierced by a cold. He was completely chilled with surprise when suddenly Yang stood before him, just as alive as he had been 20 years ago. After all, this was his younger brother, whom he had considered his most beloved and trusted all his life, despite the years of separation and long-standing conflicts. Jan moved away from him, pushed him away with his hand, and asked reproachfully what he was doing here and why he continued to play at being a virtue. The emperor said that even if the whole country believed these shameful rumors, he as a brother would not listen to or believe such fabrications. He insisted that he would not allow lies to settle between them because he had always known Ian and understood what he really was without embellishment. Then the emperor said that there were rumors going around the palace that the Duke had a certain girl who was secretly living with him. The Duke clutched his head in annoyance. He could not even imagine that his brother would actually discuss such nonsense with him. He immediately said that this was complete nonsense and that he had no girlfriend. All this was nothing more than rumors spread by idle tongues. He then sharply reminded her that all this confusion directly affected the Duchess's position, since she was now the one in the crosshairs. The Emperor did not argue, but only noted that decisions could always be reversed, and the Duke was already at war, and who knew if he would return. He didn't deserve all this attention, but Duke Ian Tyrone made it clear that he wasn't interested in any of it. The brother turned to Ian Tyrone and quietly remarked that in his opinion, there was nothing surprising or particularly important about marriage. They spend time together, continue to live, despite their differences. Sometimes they hate each other, and then suddenly they begin to feel affection again. He noted that he chose his wife not out of love, but simply because they were born on the same day. But now their relationship is far from ideal. She was born on the same date as he was, and for this reason he decided that such a coincidental fate made her suitable for marriage. If a duke behaves inappropriately, most courtiers simply silently put up with it and move on with their lives without objecting. Ian Tyrone was comfortable alone and did not feel a strong need for close relationships, preferring personal space. The emperor was determined and declared that he was going to ignore all the rumors that were spreading, considering them empty talk. The girl aroused his suspicions. He could not understand why she was acting so strangely and irrationally in these circumstances. The emperor noted that he considered her to be extremely intelligent and that her actions were not spontaneous, but were the result of a carefully thought-out plan. He also noted that her determination to destroy the alliance concluded under pressure from the emperor was bold and therefore invited the Duke to meet her personally. Ian Tyrone once again emphasized that he had already spoken about his categorical unwillingness to enter into such a relationship and did not intend to change his mind. However, the emperor did not back down and said that even if Yang did not want it, he was sure that the girl herself would strive to have a relationship with the Duke. The emperor added that speaking for himself personally, he fully approved of this possibility, even if others might be against it. Perhaps Jan should meet her in person and decline this offer to put an end to this story and leave no omissions. Now the girl directly proposed to him to marry her without hiding her intentions, as if making a move in some protracted political game. Duke Tyrone could not understand what exactly was happening to this girl and why her behavior had become so contradictory and strange. Now the Duke began to understand what the Emperor had meant when he said that she had not only determination, but also inner courage. He noted that it was extremely rare for someone to make him feel confused, but she somehow managed to do it. Olivia remarked that she understood perfectly well what was happening, and Duke Ian Tyrone asked if she really didn't care that he was called a eunuch, as if it didn't bother her. The lady replied with a slight smile that on the contrary she was satisfied with everything, as if she was even flattered that he was considered so cold and imperturbable. All this bed flickering seemed to her not passion, but something like dragonflies, constantly fluttering and annoying, and Olivia could not stand dragonflies. Ian asked her to finish this meaningless and tiresome pun, which seemed to have neither end nor beginning, and only confused the conversation. The lady mockingly noted that the Duke also had a very poor sense of humor, as if even when he was happy he managed to be sad. She thought he would have lost his temper long ago, but it turned out that he was much more patient than she could have imagined. He said, as if with regret, that he didn't know how to conduct conversations at all, was boring and completely indifferent to other people, as if he wasn't from this world at all. Ian continued by saying that he didn't know what she expected from him, but he was sure that she would be disappointed because he was a different person. In his opinion, she is already a little too old to believe in fairy tales and indulge in romantic fantasies, which almost never happen in life. If you think about it, James Parnell, her late husband, was not particularly talkative either. He was quiet and reserved. Olivia suddenly realized that the number of words Ian had spoken in the last few minutes was almost equal to what James had spoken all week. Sometimes it seemed that the Duke behaved not like a living person, but like a wall, silent, impenetrable, and cold, not reacting to anything. Olivia suddenly realized that all this time she had been living the life of a lonely woman, as if her youth had been spent waiting for something that had not happened. After this thought, she came closer to the Duke, looking straight into his eyes, and as if for the first time in a long time, she saw a person in him. She remembered and noted that Jan didn't have parents, and her voice sounded softer than before, almost sympathetic. He nodded and confirmed that it was true. Both his parents had died leaving him alone when he was young, and he had never really talked about it. Then Olivia said that this was exactly why he should marry her, as if that was the meaning, the continuation that he was missing. He had not expected such a turn of events at all, and could not understand what it would lead to at all, because everything looked different, and he had not even thought about such an outcome. Olivia Florence confidently stated that she had calculated everything in advance, and being in her rights as a saint suggested doing what she considered the only right thing. This was not a joke, and not some kind of ridiculous prank. Everything had to be serious. He really had to marry her, no options. The emperor must have been completely at a loss. His only cousin not only did not support him, he did not even think of refusing or even objecting. But this is exactly how Olivia Florence got more chances, because the emperor himself admitted that he could not get it up for any woman except the Duchess of Parnell. If the rumors had already reached the emperor, she was sure that he fully supported their marriage, and therefore put a final and firm end to it. The first thing she had to do was convince Duke Jan, so she decided to tell him something important, something that she believed would put everything in its place. She said outright that all this meant that he was just playing with her, and that all his affection and attention had no real value. Everyone in the area was simply shocked by her words, not knowing how to react, and Olivia continued to speak, not noticing either the fear or the silent panic around her. But he suddenly approached her gently, but firmly covered her mouth with his hand, and quietly told her to speak more quietly, so as not to make a scene in public. Duke Jan's hands were so soft and unexpectedly gentle, completely unlike the rough, heavy palms of James Parnell. And why she was even trying to compare this man with her ex-husband, this pathetic idiot, she did not understand at all at that moment. After that, he removed his hand and said that in such a short time, she had already put him in an awkward and embarrassing position several times. He added that it would be wiser to talk about this in a more closed and calm environment to avoid further misunderstandings. After this, they went into a separate secluded room where the waiter greeted them and politely wished them a pleasant stay. But suddenly, Olivia asked the man to stop, as if something inside her was preventing her from taking the next step, and she felt anxious. Suddenly, the lady asked the man to stop, as if suddenly realizing the need for a pause in what was happening. Her voice was calm but insistent. She wanted Earl Grey to go with her, snack emphasizing that this particular tea would accompany her evening mood and create a special atmosphere. He understood her wish and noted that now was the best time for dessert, as if sensing the mood and readiness for a sweet end to the evening. Vertal noticed that she seemed to really like this particular place, perhaps because of the coziness or the mood it created for her. The girl said that this was the only joy she felt here, as if everything else around her did not bring her the same pleasure and warmth. After that, a strange silence suddenly fell between them, as if the tension had become more noticeable, and words could no longer find an outlet. She asked him to marry her again, as if trying to assert her desire and change the current situation. He asked her to stop repeating it, and she was surprised at how embarrassed Yang looked, although she never expected that from him. He became very serious, as if he had taken on the weight of a decision, and a new depth and responsibility appeared in his eyes. It was good for him to be young, and this feeling of freedom and strength was evident in his every movement and look. The girl replied that she would stop repeating her requests only when he gave his consent, indicating her firm determination. He asked why him, and she asked again, trying to understand his doubts and the reasons for such a question. He assumed that she wanted to marry him only because of the song she heard, considering it an impulsive act. Therefore, he did not understand why he had to resort to such extreme measures if everything could be resolved differently, without haste and pressure. The girl noted that she had already explained her motives in detail, trying to convey to him the seriousness of the situation and her internal crisis. She repeated that she has big problems. Now her mother-in-law behaves extremely negatively and tears her apart, creating constant stress. Therefore, instead of enduring all this, it is better to turn rumors into reality and end this difficult stage in life with an official marriage. He was surprised that she would say that, and for that reason alone, his surprise was genuine, because the reason seemed too simple to matter to her. She replied that it was a very important reason. If he had ever encountered such a mother-in-law, he would understand why her words were so serious and significant for her personally. After her explanation, the Duke actually apologized for his previous words. His apology was sincere, and he realized that he had made a mistake in his behavior and statements. The lady said that she forgave him. After that, she carefully touched Igor, thus demonstrating her affection and readiness to move forward in their relationship. She likes that he doesn't have overprotective parents and appreciates that he's not too talkative. She's attracted to his calmness and lack of interest in women, which sets him apart from others. She also noted that she was happy with the fact that he was not erect, considering this an important detail that increased her sympathy and satisfaction in her relationship with him. After these words, he felt very tired and confused. In response, she said that this is exactly why she wants him to marry her, making her proposal even more serious. He felt embarrassed and looked away, not knowing how to react to this confession, internally struggling with his feelings and the awkwardness of the situation. She also asked him to respond faster, hinting that she expected more decisive action and clear answers from him in the near future. At that moment, a waiter came in and apologized for disturbing their conversation, showing respect and concern for the comfortable atmosphere at the table. Seeing them holding hands, the waiter became a little embarrassed and moved aside, not wanting to violate their personal space and creating a slightly awkward mood. The lady immediately moved away from the waiter, who announced that he had brought the tea they had ordered, thereby returning the conversation to a calmer and more familiar channel. Because of all these events, Olivia did not feel completely calm. Internal excitement and worries did not allow her to relax and enjoy the moment completely. Tyrone wondered if she really enjoyed the tea, trying to gauge how content and comfortable she was in her current environment, showing care and attention. Olivia admitted that it's not her favorite option, but it's still a very nice and flattering shade that's worth trying. She suggested that he also try and taste the drink to understand its taste. After pouring him a mug, she watched as he decided to try the tea, albeit with a little hesitation. Olivia was pleasantly surprised when she realized that he actually agreed to try, despite his doubts. He quickly drank the tea, and this caused a real shock to the lady who did not expect such a hasty decision. After this, he immediately declared that he intended to marry her, leaving no room for doubt. Taking her hand, he frankly said that he was tired of listening to the same excuses and was ready to take action. The girl was so surprised by this abrupt decision that at first she couldn't even believe her ears. He repeated that they would do it immediately, without delay, and without unnecessary talk. At first, the lady did not understand what exactly he meant, and asked again to clarify the situation. She stated that she might have to return then and would wait for his formal invitation. He admitted that he did not understand what she was talking about and where she was going to return to at that moment. They looked at each other, trying to understand what was really being discussed and what was hidden behind the words. Since the marriage issue had been decided, why would the girl return to her ex-husband's estate? It seemed pointless. He clarified that they would simply move into their shared future home, which would be the beginning of a new life. The Duke of Tyrone's estate was truly vast and luxurious, which added confidence to the future. The girl could not comprehend how everything had turned so quickly, and that now a new chapter lay ahead. She herself was surprised and did not expect such a turn of events, although she understood that anything was possible. Despite everything, she remained calm and confident, and he in turn did not show any weaknesses either. Either way, it was as if a huge weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and she felt relief and inner peace. As soon as she does not conclude this marriage, she will manage to enliven this gloomy living room, making it more comfortable and bright despite all its gloom. The Duke came to her and informed her that she would have to wait a little because the visit was unexpected and her room was not yet prepared for the reception. She replied that there was no need to worry. A day here wouldn't hurt, and one could easily spend the night on the sofa without experiencing any particular discomfort. In fact, the sofa was much more comfortable than the old bed from the abandoned salon, where the quality of the furniture left much to be desired and only caused irritation. This place really did resemble a hell of a dump, where these rude and cruel mothers-in-law seemed to be deliberately torturing her, not giving her any peace and creating constant tension. That life had already passed, and she knew that this time would not be repeated. Now everything would change, and she would have a chance to start from scratch. The Duke noticed how she stared into space, clutching her head in her hands, and did not understand what exactly was being discussed. Her thoughts were confused and scattered. He sighed heavily and admitted that he didn't know what was happening in the estate, now how things were going there, and who was in charge now, his ex-husband or someone else. However, as a duchess, she could not stay here overnight. It was unacceptable from the point of view of etiquette and the rules that he tried to maintain. Olivia said that in that case, she could spend the night with him because he was only a eunuch, and such company would be acceptable and safe. He was very surprised by this proposal and did not expect to hear something like this because he never let anyone into his bedroom, considering it his personal space. The Duke tried to look mature and serious, although he looked more like an innocent 20-year-old boy who was not yet accustomed to responsibility. He thought that something was clearly bothering her, and he was sure that she was experiencing some kind of internal discomfort that he could not yet understand. The girl openly admitted that she does not like children and does not want to have them, which for many would be an unexpected and even shocking statement. Before returning, she already had 2 children, which made her words even more weighty and difficult for others to understand. Because of the difficult and dangerous birth in which she almost died, all her feelings for her children disappeared, and now she perceived them differently, without the former warmth. The labor pains were so severe that recovery from them will be long and difficult. The consequences made themselves felt, not only physically, but also on an emotional level, leaving a deep mark on the soul. Everyone thought that the lady was determined to take care of the children and be there for them, but she was very clear that she did not want to take on that role. Her intentions were clear: to go her own way despite the expectations of others. At that moment, her husband entered the room unexpectedly, interrupting the conversation and adding a new dynamic to the situation. His appearance immediately attracted the attention of everyone nearby. He looked at the child carefully and received confirmation that the baby was healthy and his life was not in danger. This calmed those present down a little, allowing them to relax for a while. Although the lady was often persistent and demanding of attention, it did not matter much to her husband. He remained indifferent to her words and behavior, not giving them any weight. The man said that it was time for him to leave and asked to take care of everything necessary before he left. His words caused a slight uneasiness among those around him, leaving a feeling of some anxiety. Everyone was surprised by his hasty departure because a child was quietly crying in the room, as if sensing the tense atmosphere and anxiety that was in the air. No one could understand how he could just leave without looking at his wife, who was left alone at this difficult moment, as if abandoned to her fate and without support. Despite the pain and fear, she was ready to go through all the trials on her own, even if it meant that she would never see her children again and would be left alone with her worries. Olivia believed that she knew this feeling as an unhappy woman in the last years of her life, who had no children, and perhaps even in such a situation, she would not want to change her decision. She prepared herself carefully so as not to become like many women who lose themselves and their lives due to the lack of heirs and support from loved ones. Therefore, she didn't care if he turned out to be a eunuch. On the contrary, it was even better for her, because then there would be no problems with inheritance and family intrigues. He said he understood her position, and she asked if the issue of succession and continuation of the family line was important to him, since he seemed too relaxed about it. She was surprised at how easily he took such a serious question, as if it didn't matter to him, which made her uneasy. She noted that perhaps it was none of her business to interfere, but with such an attitude, he could face serious losses and problems in the future. The more serious the problem, the more attention it needs to receive. But he didn't notice this, and she began to grumble, trying to somehow shake him up and draw his attention to herself. He nodded silently, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, because he didn't care, and didn't want to waste time arguing over trivial matters that seemed pointless and not worth the effort. For him, the situation did not matter much, despite the possible unpleasant consequences or problems that could arise later due to such indifference and lack of decisive action. She noticed his reluctance to engage in conversation and felt confused, not understanding what to do in the current situation, since there was no response or initiative from him. After thinking for a moment, she smiled quietly, trying to hide her true feelings and choose the right words to smooth out the tension and somehow direct the conversation in the right direction. Then she sat down and fell silent, realizing that trying to get him to be active or interested at the moment was futile, and it was better to just wait without pushing it. Vertal asked her not to look at him, but she replied that she was not looking, although this was not entirely true. She was trying to hide her attention and not show her emotions. He reproached her for having just looked at him with pity, as if she saw in him the most unhappy man in the world, and this had hurt her inner feelings. Olivia protested that this was not true, and that her look had not expressed pity. The Duke seemed to her too complex and incomprehensible a man to feel pity for him. He thought for a moment, as if not believing his ears, and decided to pretend that he did not hear her excuses, distancing himself with his thoughts and going into his own inner world. She wanted to apologize for her jokes, but his reaction was so unexpected and funny that she lost the desire to ask for forgiveness, and she simply remained silent. She felt an unusual sensation, as if someone was slowly approaching her from the darkness, causing a slight alarm and vague concern, as if an invisible observer had suddenly appeared nearby. Opening her eyes, she noticed that the gentleman was standing right above her, and this sight caused her great fear and confusion, since the unexpected appearance seemed frightening and fraught with the unknown. The fear increased when he suddenly leaned towards her, as if he wanted to say or do something, leaving no time for calm awareness of what was happening, creating an atmosphere of tension. The girl was confused, not understanding how to react correctly, because he looked unusually beautiful and so close that it caused mixed feelings between fear and admiration. She wondered why exactly he seemed so attractive, and why he was so close at that moment, causing her confusion and inner anxiety. He asked where she had suddenly appeared before his eyes, as if it were an unexpected and even funny coincidence, which added a certain lightness to the situation. The girl admitted that she did not know what to answer, and decided it was better not to interfere, allowing him to go about his business, without unnecessary questions, trying to remain calm. She understood that a lot of work and worries lay ahead of her, connected with preparations for the wedding, which requires maximum attention and effort, leaving no time for unnecessary thoughts. She felt ashamed, but at the same time, she was shocked by the way he suddenly pinned her to the couch, violating her personal space and creating a feeling of invasion. He should have explained the reason for this behavior and explained why he was hanging over her like that, but he was in no hurry to answer, leaving her in uncertainty. The Duke only said that they would definitely see each other again later, leaving behind a mysterious feeling and many unresolved questions in her head. Left alone, the girl sat on the sofa and tried to somehow dispel the tension, but the surrounding silence seemed too dense, as if the whole world had frozen in anticipation of something important. He wondered whether he really had problems with potency, or whether it was just the fruit of his fears and doubts that swarmed in his mind without a clear reason. It is impossible to understand how a person who seems to be failing at anything can appear so full of desire and passion, judging by his look and behavior. He was already over 20, and he was still a bachelor. This increasingly confirmed that the problem was not invented, but really existed and needed a solution. This situation caused anxiety and doubt. Suddenly, a servant entered the room and announced that the ladies were ready. Everything happened much faster than she expected, and this slight acceleration of events slightly raised her spirits, adding confidence in what was to come. Events moved quickly, but that was precisely what made the moment so appealing. She didn't have to wait long, and that helped to ease the tension, making the situation lighter and more enjoyable for her. In the evening, she was already in her room, where silence and soft darkness reigned, creating a calm and peaceful atmosphere, allowing her to relax and forget about the worries that had accumulated during the day. Into this silence, the butler quietly entered and asked her to wake up quickly, reminding her that everything was ready and the time was coming to act, so as not to delay further events and maintain their desired course. Opening her eyes, she was surprised to notice James nearby, a man whose appearance here and now was a complete surprise to her and raised many questions that she could not immediately answer. She tried to understand why James was in this room at this particular moment, but she could not find a logical explanation for his presence, which increased her anxiety and confusion. Suddenly, James took off his clothes and started making advances towards her, causing her to feel deeply embarrassed and tense, which made her want to stop this unwanted behavior immediately. She tried to stop him with words holding back her emotions, and insistently asking James to stop trying not to let him cross the line and maintain her own dignity in this difficult situation. When words failed to have any effect, she decided to take a more decisive action. She hit him in the face to make him stop insisting and regain control over what was happening while maintaining her inner strength. Having made her wishes clear, she demanded that the bullying stop, insisting on respect, and calm, demonstrating her determination to protect herself and restore order to this tense and unpleasant situation. She felt sickened by everything that was happening, and she grabbed his hand, trying to fight back and protect herself from this situation that seemed unbearable and frightening at the same time. But a few seconds later, she suddenly woke up and realized that it was just a terrible dream that had nothing to do with real life and could not affect her present. She breathed a sigh of relief, realizing that despite the anxiety of the dream, it was all over, and there was silence and calm around her again, returning her to her normal state. She had to go to the palace, where an important meeting was expected, and James, it seemed, was already there, ready for the next stage, and awaiting her arrival with impatience. The Duke looked incredibly handsome and attractive. His charisma and appearance made him stand out from the crowd, making everyone pay attention to him and admire his appearance. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and he graciously invited the guests in, allowing them to pass inside without further ado, creating an atmosphere of ease and hospitality. The maids entered the room, holding neatly arranged dishes in their hands, ready to begin setting the table and creating the necessary decoration for the upcoming meal. They silently set to work carefully arranging the cutlery and decorations, filling the room with coziness and creating a pleasant atmosphere for all present. The lady was clearly surprised by what was happening, and the Duke wished everyone a bon appetit, behaving as if everything that was happening was a familiar and natural event. Olivia noticed that he had just confirmed the necessity of choice, as if he were addressing someone who had to make an important decision, giving the event a special meaning. She replied that in that case, they should at least have lunch together, despite the fact that the meaning of the whole situation remained unclear to her and caused internal anxiety. She felt a growing tension, remembering that His Majesty could appear at any moment, and this expectation added to her anxiety and nervousness. The Duke assured them that everything was fine, and that the first thing they needed to do was have a quiet breakfast without any rush or worries. He wanted them to take their time and not give in to excitement, but to keep their minds clear and calm. Olivia was surprised that everything could go so calmly, because before His Majesty always seemed like a stern and unyielding person, capable of causing fear even in those closest to him. In her memory, he remained cruel and unfriendly. It was difficult to talk to him and find a common language. His severity sometimes seemed like an insurmountable barrier to communication. When Olivia officially became a duchess and entered high society, her impression of the Duke's character only intensified. His behavior seemed even more formidable and unpredictable. At this time, the emperor had already become the crown prince, and Olivia herself inherited the throne early, which greatly influenced the development of events and changed her position in politics and palace life. The previous emperor closely monitored the situation, supported Olivia, and strengthened her position, because many underestimated her precisely because she was a woman. However, this emperor soon began to commit terrible acts, causing fear and discontent among his subjects, which greatly complicated life in the palace and in Olivia's circle. Among other things, he carried out a bloody purge among his inner circle, and even Romeo complained that the emperor was treating him very badly and unfairly. Romeo was so depressed that he could not create or enjoy life while married. Olivia wondered if he was truly opening up to her in these moments. After his apology, Olivia felt lucky to have a friend like Romeo, who always supported her both now and then during difficult times. The fact that she could now have a peaceful breakfast was thanks to Romeo, who helped fulfill even her most stupid requests and made her life easier. But their strong friendship became a weakness that was exploited by talkative people, spreading rumors and intrigues behind Olivia and Romeo's backs. However, thanks to the rise of the emperor, they continued to maintain contact with Romeo, despite all the rumors and condemnation from those around them. The empress claimed that her husband and the Duchess of Parnell were really good friends, so no one should worry too much about it, because the emperor was a man of great power and intelligence. As a duchess, it was not easy for her to cope with even one family, and this added stress to her daily duties and affairs at the palace. They say that someone asked her what she would do if he refused. This question was meant to test her resolve and see how prepared she was for a difficult situation. The girl was confused and did not immediately understand what exactly was being discussed. Her gaze became more inquisitive. She tried to grasp the meaning to understand what they really wanted from her. He explained that rumors about them had been going around for a long time, and he wondered how she would react if he refused. This changed the entire course of their conversation and made her look at the situation differently. She said that in that case, all her mothers-in-law would be forced to throw her out of the house because there would be no room left for her there, and support would disappear completely. However, given that Florence's debts were fully repaid, she would still have the opportunity to return to her family, which would give at least some hope for the future. But instead of words, she remained silent and thoughtful, immersing herself in memories of the family she had left behind, and of the life that now seemed distant and unattainable to her. Suddenly, a vivid picture came to life in her memory. She was standing in her house surrounded by familiar walls that contained hundreds of memories and experiences. She remembered a casual conversation she had overheard. The Viscount saying that the Duke of Parnell was willing to cover all their debts in full, which was an unexpected turn of events. It was supposed to be some kind of wedding gift or honor, since the Duke had done a great job of arranging his daughter's marriage successfully and providing financial support. The time had long since come when daughters who only created unnecessary troubles and worries in the family had to become a tool for solving important matters. It was this thought that dominated the conversation and set the general tone of the discussion. The words came from the father, who had been watching the elder Mrs. Parnell's reaction closely. Her face betrayed displeasure and confusion, as if the decision had struck at her inner convictions and plans. After that, the conversation suddenly turned to laughter. Everyone, including Olivia, could not hold back their smiles. Despite the seriousness of the topic, the atmosphere relaxed and a cheerful mood took over the company. Olivia had deeply decided for herself that under no circumstances, even if her life was in danger, would she ever return to her home, which now seemed alien and dangerous. She was absolutely firm in her intention not to cross the threshold of that house, which was once perceived as a native, cozy, and safe place, but now lost all these qualities. Olivia also realized that she shouldn't let him inquire about her origins. It was pointless since he remained indifferent and did not play any significant role in her life. The more she tried to convey her thoughts and feelings, the more he remained confused. It was as if an invisible barrier had appeared between them, which words only strengthened, confusing them even more. He was sure that her whole life had been very difficult and unhappy, and that was precisely why she looked at the world with pain and did not want to open up to anyone completely. The girl sent to them really intended to continue this senseless and stupid conversation, as if hoping to somehow change the situation or achieve understanding. He answered in the negative, simply stood silently, and tried to forget all these words without going into details, because the conversation made no sense and only tired both of them. He then suggested a snack, explaining that they had a lot of things planned for after lunch, and so it was worthwhile to have a little refreshment before the upcoming chores. She didn't understand what kind of business he was talking about, so she just looked at him confusedly, not knowing what to answer or how to behave in this situation. At that moment, the maid entered the room, greeted Madame warmly, and introduced herself, saying that she was in charge of the internal affairs of the house and kept order. Apparently, addressing Olivia as Madame had already become customary and established, which gave her status more formality and respect from the servants. Olivia responded to the maid's greeting politely, expressing that she was pleased to meet her, thereby maintaining a friendly tone and creating an atmosphere of trust. The maid said that the tailor was waiting for Madame and asked her to come with her, hinting that preparations for the meeting or event had already begun and should not be delayed. Olivia was shocked and asked again what exactly was being discussed, not understanding why she was suddenly being called and what news they were going to tell her. The Duke noted that they needed to visit His Majesty, but all of the ladies' outfits were at her ex-husband's estate, which created additional complexity and inconvenience to the situation. Olivia noticed that His Majesty was looking forward to their arrival, and even if they left now, they would still be late for the appointed time. This worried her a little. However, the butler assured that the Emperor was in a good mood today, so a little delay would not be a big problem, and they did not need to rush. Olivia couldn't believe the words she heard, because she didn't know what exactly was waiting for them in the place they were heading to. This feeling of uncertainty caused her anxiety and inner restlessness. The Duke insisted on his decision, and despite her doubts, Olivia decided to agree to the proposed plan. She hoped that everything would go smoothly and without unexpected problems. Although her heart was squeezed with excitement, the girl said that she was ready for what was to come and agreed to be taken to the tailor. She was to try on a dress that was to be prepared especially for her, and this moment seemed important and responsible. Olivia noticed the Duke walking alongside her and thought he was just going to watch the proceedings without interfering. His calmness calmed her down a little, but the inner discomfort still remained. She pointed the way to the right room, trying to hide her excitement. In her heart, she hoped that everything would go smoothly, and no one would notice her confusion and anxiety at this important moment. When they entered the room, Olivia was amazed by what she saw. It seemed completely new and unusual to her, something she had never experienced before, and this added a special tension to the situation. The girl had never encountered anything like this before, but the tailor greeted her with respect and friendliness. His friendly attitude calmed her down a little and gave her hope that everything would work out well. At this point, the Duke sat down next to Olivia, and the tailor carefully examined her, choosing a suitable outfit. The atmosphere became a little calmer, but the importance of the moment was still felt acutely. Olivia introduced herself to the tailor as Mrs. Florenz so that he could address her by name and with respect. It was a small but important step for her in this new and unfamiliar environment. The tailor responded kindly and invited Olivia to look at the dress he had specially prepared for her. He wanted to show that he had taken into account all her wishes and was trying to create something special. She noted that perhaps it would be worth choosing burgundy for the outfit because it would look rich and noble. Although pink was also a good option, giving the image lightness and tenderness. The tailor was genuinely surprised by this choice and asked if she wanted to match the dress to the color of her eyes so that the image would be more harmonious and emphasize her expressiveness. Olivia confirmed that this is exactly the case. It is important for her that clothes emphasize her natural beauty and match her look, creating a harmonious and memorable image. The tailor turned to the gentleman, but Olivia turned away and remarked that they were not yet married, so there was no point in choosing outfits that should match each other now. The tailor was at a loss as to how to respond to such an answer, and simply looked at the gentleman, waiting for further instructions or clarification regarding Olivia's request. The gentleman ordered the tailor to do exactly as the lady asked, emphasizing that her opinion was the most important thing to him and was paramount in this matter. Olivia smiled and asked if the tailor had heard her request. He, a little embarrassed, replied that he understood everything and would definitely follow her instructions so as not to disappoint her. A couple of hours later, the emperor summoned them again, and they hastened to fulfill this challenge, realizing that they could not wait, and it was important not to delay so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion. She had already said that they needed to go faster, but no one present paid attention to her and continued to hesitate, not realizing the seriousness of the situation. For her, the emperor's word is not empty words, but a strict order that cannot be ignored or taken as a joke. The Duke assumed that the Duchy of Purnell was rather poor and not very rich, which affected the attitude towards resources and external manifestations. The lady was surprised, thinking that the Duke would dislike her clothes so much, and she expected harsher criticism, but the reaction was more calm. The gentleman confirmed that this was indeed the case, and his opinion coincided with the lady's concerns regarding the perception of her outfit. She did the most beautiful thing she could, but she was very upset about it and couldn't hide her feelings. It was important and valuable to her, but at that moment she felt anxious. She said that after the wedding, he would definitely be able to provide her with a luxurious and peaceful life, full of conveniences and comforts. And this is exactly what she was counting on when she chose him. She expected him to prove, with his determination and actions, that her choice was correct, and that she had never made a mistake in trusting him in such an important matter. He thought she was acting a little strange and unpredictable, but there was something attractive and interesting about it that he even liked, and was a little surprised by. Once in the palace, they quickly got out of the carriage, and without wasting time, went inside the large and pompous building, where everything spoke of the power and wealth that surrounded them. The emperor, seeing his younger brother's wife, rushed into her arms. The joy on his face was obvious, and he was clearly pleased with such an unexpected appearance in his house. However, the Duke objected and covered his wife with his hand, showing that he did not like too violent displays of emotion in the presence of others trying to protect her. Olivia immediately greeted him respectfully, although she was a little frightened by such a reaction, not expecting such a sharp and slightly cold attitude towards herself. The emperor insisted that she cast aside all formality, and formality rose from her knees and began to behave more freely as the circumstances of the meeting demanded. He looked around carefully and said that before moving on to the main conversation, he wanted them to sign some important papers necessary for the case. When she saw that there was a marriage certificate in front of her, she was overcome with great surprise, because she did not expect such a rapid development of events in anything. She was in shock, because she had no idea that everything would happen so quickly, and it was difficult for her to comprehend that everything was happening literally before her eyes. She did not understand how the emperor could put his seal on documents without having received permission and instructions from above, because it seemed too unusual. Yet he did have a kind heart, and his actions showed that he genuinely cared and wanted to help even if it went against customs and rules. She said that His Highness asserted that she wanted to ask him something, but she did not dare to voice it directly. It was said with a slight hesitation, but with importance in her voice. The gentleman asked her to speak faster and explain what exactly she wanted to know. She replied that there might be rumors if she got divorced, and that it would cause certain consequences in society. She then suggested that they settle things with the Parnell family first, so as not to create unnecessary problems and misunderstandings from the start. It sounded like a reasonable and cautious plan. After her words, the emperor suddenly laughed loudly, as if he had heard something very funny, or simply did not believe in the seriousness of the situation. His laughter filled the entire room and interrupted the moment. He stated that there would be no rumors because the Parnell family had already filed the annulment papers first, and everything was going according to plan without any gossip or delays. After that, the emperor took out the documents and showed them to Olivia. She was so surprised that she even asked again, not believing her eyes. Everything happened too quickly and unexpectedly. The divorce papers were in her hands, and she never expected the process to go so quickly and decisively. It was a complete surprise and a bit of a shock for her. It all happened so quickly that she didn't even have time to blink, as if time had flashed by and the changes had occurred without her participation or the opportunity to prepare. The emperor explained that the man had come directly from the duchy with these documents, and they had been delivered quickly and officially so as to avoid any delays or revisions. He was afraid that they might change their mind or try to cancel the decision, so he immediately put the imperial seal on the papers to secure everything legally, and finally, these same documents will be sent to Duke James so that he is also informed and can take the necessary steps in accordance with the divorce process. Olivia laughed quietly nervously because she didn't expect such a turn of events, especially since everything happened with incredible speed, much faster than she could have imagined. As you would expect from these three mothers-in-law, they have not changed at all. Still decisive, strict, and quick in making decisions, leaving no room for doubt. Luckily, none of them remained in her life anymore, and this was a relief for her because old problems were left behind, and she could move on without unnecessary burden. The lady stated that she fully agreed with all the conditions and was ready to sign the necessary documents, assuring that her words about marriage would be fulfilled without the slightest doubt or deviation. The emperor was genuinely happy and overjoyed at the news that his younger brother had finally decided to get married, perceiving it as a great event and a real reason for celebration. The certificate was then given to the Duke to sign to formalize his consent to the marriage and to secure this step legally and formally. She noticed that the Duke was looking at the documents with some strange expression, as if he was doubting or hiding something important, and she could not understand his true intentions. She was unclear whether he had now withdrawn his consent, despite the fact that she had already signed the papers and officially expressed her consent to the marriage. She turned to Ian to ask what he was doing and asked him to hurry up with the signature, wanting to complete all the formalities as soon as possible and move on to the next stage. Jan turned to the emperor, and then she realized that the Duke had effectively ignored her request and had decided to act differently, without haste or obeying her wishes. The emperor believed that his brother had summoned him because he was the most beloved uncle in the world, and he sincerely hoped to receive his support and understanding in this matter. He expected that the wedding would not be limited to just the signing of one document, but would be accompanied by a real ceremony and celebration. Olivia did not fully understand the meaning of the Duke's words, and could not say exactly what he meant by his behavior and statements. The emperor calmly explained that, of course, a full wedding ceremony would be held, which would officially complete the process. This had to be done in advance, before they changed their minds and any obstacles arose. The decision required timely implementation so that later, everything would not have to be postponed or redone. It was a simple formal procedure, nothing more and nothing less. Everyone present had heard something like this before. He only briefly spoke about the shackles without going into details. The Duke insisted that in that case, the emperor provide them with the Diamond Hall as a place to hold the important event, since this hall was considered the most prestigious in the palace. The lady was shocked, because the Diamond Hall is one of the most famous and at the same time difficult halls in the entire imperial palace. The Diamond Hall was famous for its luxury and splendor. It was the most famous of all the palace halls. Royal ceremonies were usually held there, which were distinguished by special solemnity and magnificence, emphasizing the status and grandeur of the family. For example, it was in this hall that the wedding ceremony between Romeo and the Empress took place, which gave the place even more significance and historical importance. She was very surprised that her future husband also wanted to hold his wedding there, because this spoke of the seriousness of his intentions. The emperor first looked at the duke with a stern and serious expression, as if he was about to refuse or test his strength. His gaze was cold, causing tension in everyone present. Olivia felt a little scared, but soon the emperor softened and said that he agreed. He hugged his nephew tightly, showing his support and approval of the decision, which inspired hope and confidence. She thought that if the duke had not been capable of important things, it would have become immediately obvious. But he had shown willpower and achieved a great victory, which was now recognized and respected by everyone. Olivia didn't understand what exactly they were talking about. The strange language and unusual setting only added to the mystery, making everything that was happening confusing and incomprehensible to her. The emperor confirmed his consent and announced that the wedding was scheduled for the following week, thereby setting a clear deadline and accelerating the course of events. He also noted that he would ask the empress to help with the preparations for the celebration, and all those present expressed gratitude for this support and care from the highest officials. After all these events, they left the meeting place and went home. Thoughts and worries were already arising in Olivia's soul. She tried to comprehend what had happened and calm her inner excitement. The memory of the emperor asking her to look after her nephew, emphasizing the importance of this request, came back to her mind, making her think again about the role she would have to play. So, Olivia turned to her husband and looked at him, looking in his eyes for support and understanding. Because now everything was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. She looked at him attentively, and for a long time, her gaze was serious and a little demanding, which made the Duke ask what she needed and what she was thinking about. The girl reported that his uncle was very worried about him, which in her opinion could affect the atmosphere around them and their relationship, causing tension. However, the Duke did not see this as his fault, believing that his uncle's worries were caused by nothing other than his own experiences, which he was inflating too much. He noted that his uncle simply made up various horror stories for himself and was constantly worried about them, although in reality there was little or no reason to worry. The uncle had not had any business lately, and perhaps because of boredom and emptiness in his life, he had a bad mood, but at the same time he remained kind and caring to his nephew. In general, such a situation happened, and the Duke did not attach much importance to it, considering it a normal human condition that would pass with time. He also expressed the opinion that the real solution would be for them to decide for themselves how they should address each other so that it would be convenient and comfortable for both of them. She asked again whether it was possible to continue communicating as before, without changing the form of address, and received confirmation that this was completely acceptable and would not cause any problems. The Duke was silent for a moment, but then smiling slightly called her wifey, thereby emphasizing his closeness and warmth in their relationship. These words made Alina feel a little bored, and she blushed noticeably as if remembering something that made her heart beat faster and worry for no apparent reason. A memory came to mind of how Ivan the Terrible had once called her ex-husband, simply wife, and this nickname was so simple that it concealed some kind of coldness and detachment. Alina's heart sank at this, because it seemed to her that such treatment was definitely not appropriate for the two of them, and she made it clear that she did not want to hear it again. He thought about it, trying to come up with another name or address that would not hurt her feelings, and perhaps restore the trust that had been lost. It seemed like a difficult task, but he wanted to find a way that would work. In the end, he decided to simply call her Olivia, hoping that such an address would sound tender and close, without unpleasant connotations. He believed that this would help maintain warmth and respect between them. Olivia asked him to refrain from whispering in his ear in the future, as if she was afraid that it might lead to something unexpected or unpleasant for her, and wanted him to respect her personal boundaries. The gentleman agreed and said that he would do as she wished. However, she interrupted him, making it clear that such treatment irritated her, and she did not wish it to be repeated. She emphasized once again that she did not want him to call her that because it only irritated her and prevented her from perceiving their relationship calmly and without tension. He tried to say something in response, but suddenly fell silent, and Olivia could not understand what exactly he meant. His silence left the question unanswered and hung in the air for a while. The gentleman noticed that it was already late and suggested leaving, realizing that the conversation had come to an end. He decided to postpone the discussion until a more appropriate moment so as not to escalate the situation. Soon a letter arrived from the imperial palace solemnly announcing that the wedding was scheduled for 2 weeks, and this news immediately alarmed and excited everyone. The whole town immediately started talking about the fact that their wedding was scheduled very soon, almost without delay, and this news caused great excitement among everyone. The stormy and intense preparations for the important day began. Under tight deadlines, everyone took on their responsibilities with double the effort to get everything organized on time. There were far more tasks than initially expected, and there was a catastrophic lack of time. The maid who knew all the nuances of the household better than Olivia herself took charge of the preparations. It was she who strictly monitored each stage and controlled the progress of the work so as not to miss anything. At this point, Olivia seemed to be on the sidelines, not participating in the hustle and bustle as if she had nothing to do. She watched everything move around her, but she herself did not fit into the general rhythm as if she was detached. Then she approached her husband and explained that she had left the papers not for her, but so that he could decide important issues himself, because he had the strength, time, and experience for this. The husband was surprised and asked again if it was really she who was talking now. His voice sounded with genuine amazement and slight disbelief at what he heard. The girl replied that she had done something similar before performing as the Duchess of Parnell, and now she could do it again, as if returning to a long familiar role. He tried to object, but she confidently repeated that she could do everything because the Empress had taken care of the rest of the issues, and in this regard, she was completely calm. The girl expressed her sincere gratitude to the person who was able to move the wedding to the Diamond Hall, because this room turned out to be the most suitable and solemn for holding such an important and significant event in their lives. At first, he was a little confused, looked at her calmly, and decided to leave all the worries and decision-making entirely on her shoulders, trusting her taste and opinion without the slightest doubt. He asked the maid to take on all the chores associated with caring for the mistress, so that she could calmly concentrate on preparations and not be distracted by anything extraneous or unnecessary. Olivia replied that then they could meet a little later, when all the preparations were completed, and there would be an opportunity to see each other calmly, without fuss and haste. Suddenly, he stopped her when she was about to leave, and her surprised gaze met his. She did not understand why he stopped her at such a moment. She turned to him, trying to figure out what exactly he wanted to say, or ask, as if trying to read his thoughts and understand the reason for his unexpected impulse. At that very moment, goosebumps ran across her skin, reminiscent of the feelings that flared up on the very first occasion when their gazes crossed and they met. He admitted that he wanted to apologize for something he might have missed or underestimated before showing genuine regret and a desire to correct past mistakes. Olivia didn't immediately understand what exactly he was talking about, but he came closer and carefully adjusted her hair as if carefully correcting a minor flaw. He noticed that her hair was slightly disheveled and not quite neat, which could spoil the first impression if not corrected in time. Such a small flaw seemed important to him at the moment. Olivia thought it would have been better if he had just told her that with words, instead of silently fixing her hair, she would have liked to receive that kind of attention and feel cared for through words. He believed that she could not see her reflection, so his action was more effective and appropriate than a simple verbal remark. In this, he saw his concern and effort to help without unnecessary words. In this dispute, Olivia did not give in, showing her character and independence. She did not want to just agree, even in such trifles, showing that she knows how to defend her position. Despite the argument, she was grateful for the attention shown, and asked how long he was planning to leave since there was little work now, and they could talk calmly. After that, she quickly turned around and hurried away so that he would not have time to stop her and not force her to stay longer than she wanted, maintaining her personal space. As he left the room, the Duke smiled at her and laughed slightly, noticing her unusual behavior, which both surprised and amused him, making him feel at ease in communication. She stepped out and took a deep breath, feeling the ease of communicating with the man, which eased her inner tension a little and allowed her to feel calmer. The girl asked her maid to contact the Parnell family to resolve an important issue that could affect the preparations for her future wedding. This required precision and delicacy. She needed to ask her relatives to send her things in advance so that everything would be ready by the day of the celebration, and there would be no unpleasant surprises due to the absence of important details or accessories. The maid warned that such a request would likely cause irritation or even resistance from the Parnell family, since such actions could seem intrusive and inappropriate to them. However, these things were extremely important for the girl. Among them were a wedding dress and jewelry, without which preparation for the wedding could turn into a real problem and cause many complications. The girl expressed her willingness to buy the necessary things from the family, hoping that this approach would help resolve the issue peacefully and without unnecessary conflicts or misunderstandings. At the same time, she made it clear that she was not going to overpay and would settle for a reasonable price in order to avoid unnecessary expenses and disputes while maintaining good relations. The maid was amazed. She found it hard to believe that Madame really wanted to wear the dress she had already worn at the previous ceremony to the wedding. The lady explained that there was simply no time to create a new dress, and spending materials on a new outfit was a waste of resources and effort. The plan was to just make some small adjustments to the old dress so that it would look completely different, and then no one would notice that it had been used before. The maid was in slight shock, trying to object, but the mistress did not consider this a bad sign and calmly rejected all doubts. She looked in surprise at the maid who had once said that such a dress was a bad omen and could not understand why her opinion was now being ignored. After all, based on the dress from the previous wedding, it was usually said that it ended in divorce, and many considered this an obvious warning of fate. If Olivia had continued to endure and maintain this marriage, she probably would never have found the happiness that awaited her ahead, freeing herself from the mistakes of the past. She understood very well that there was no place for real happiness in such a marriage. Therefore, she did not want to repeat other people's fears and superstitions, trying to rely only on her feelings and reason, and not on prejudices. That is why she declared that all this was just superstition, nothing more. She believed only in her own feelings and common sense, rejecting the fears of the past, which sometimes prevent people from living and making decisions. The cloth she held in her hands could not change her fate or influence future events. To her, it was just an ordinary object not carrying any special importance or significance. She was confident in this and tried to enjoy every day while saving time and money so as not to waste resources on unnecessary things and not to be distracted by trifles. She remembered the mustard shade of the fabric very well as the words of the lady who firmly stated that this was how it should be, and that this decision was final without the right to discuss. A few days later, she informed Madame that the letter and all the necessary things had already been sent from the Parnell estate, thus completing the task without unnecessary questions or delays. After that, she carefully read the letter to understand the whole essence of the message, to tune in to the upcoming events, and to prepare for further actions that might be necessary. The letter stated that the mother-in-law was not going to argue or bargain, but would simply accept the proposed price, without trying to lower the cost or creating any obstacles. It was impossible to take the rest of the things since they had already been thrown out, and there was simply nothing to return them to. The toy girl was shocked when she saw that the lady was simply burning this letter as if it was devoid of any importance and did not deserve attention. The only reason why the letter had to be written was because of one thing that had special meaning and value to her in the family. It was a piece of jewelry that she had inherited from her mother, and she could not ignore it despite all the difficulties. The family was poor, and there was no way to offer anything as a dowry, so this gift had special significance for her. She was able to take with her only this old necklace that she had inherited from her mother. This simple gift was the only reminder of her late mother that always remained with her despite all the trials. This decoration served as a quiet memory and consolation for her, as if her mother was there despite the distance and time. It reminded her that she was not alone and that her family was always with her in her soul. Luckily, she managed to buy back the flowers that were going to be thrown away with the rest of her things. Otherwise, this part of her memory would have disappeared forever, like so many other things she had lost. After all matters were settled, she quietly said goodbye to the Parnell family, leaving behind everything that connected her to the past, and headed towards a new life. Tired, she went to bed, but the moonlight shone right into her eyes, preventing her from falling into peace. The silence of the night and the moonlight seemed to reflect her inner experiences. In the room with Olivia was her companion, a silent and attentive woman who seemed to be trying to look into the depths of her soul and understand the feelings that raged inside, remaining hidden from prying eyes. This girl stood quietly nearby. Her thoughts remained closed, incomprehensible, as if she were a mystery to herself and others. It seemed that her inner world was especially complex and contradictory. Olivia's main request, although it seemed strange and even absurd, was a proposal of marriage, as if this step could turn her life upside down and give it a new, important meaning that had eluded her until now. Despite the obvious awkwardness of the situation, her smile retained a bit of pride and inner dignity, as if she was confident in the correctness of her actions, despite her inner doubts and fears. Olivia remained polite and sweet in her behavior, strictly following the rules of etiquette, demonstrating external confidence, as if years spent in tough social circles had taught her to control any manifestation of emotion. It seemed that she had long been accustomed to life in a society where every little thing mattered, and every action was thought out and calculated to preserve a reputation and position that was difficult to lose. The entire official investigation confirmed one thing. She was reserved and silent, but at the same time polite, not allowing herself the slightest outburst of emotion and not entering into any conflicts, which made her behavior impeccable. At the academy, she was considered an ordinary student. Without outstanding achievements, she did not stand out from the crowd, and no one could have guessed that something more was hidden behind her calmness. No special talents or ambitions were noticed in her. Olivia had a small circle of close friends, among whom a young man named Romeo stood out in particular. Between them, there was a warm but quite ordinary relationship, without hints of anything more or unusual. She was an accountant by profession, but no one taught her aristocratic etiquette. The Duke, her ex-husband, and the others simply ignored her and neglected her, considering her not important enough. She was quiet and passive and knew almost nothing about the life of the high society in which she found herself. This made her even more of an outsider and invisible among the socialites and invited gatherings. Because of this, he was completely unable to understand who was in front of him. The girl who was next to him seemed completely different, unlike those he was used to seeing. Then he noticed that she was wearing a necklace. It was this detail that caught his attention the most and made him wonder about her true nature. Mustard explained that of all the things she took with her, she only had this one necklace. She did not part with anything else. This thing clearly meant a lot to her, as if it were a link to some important past or secret memory. She was a smart girl and skillfully concealed the return of valuables, hiding them behind the purchase of a wedding dress so that no one would suspect her true intentions. In this situation, he acted wisely, deciding to turn to her, and almost woke her up with his voice when he called her his wife, carefully watching her reaction to this unexpected address. He began to wonder who could call her his wife, since it was most likely the man who gave her that very necklace, and he wanted to understand what connection they had with each other. The word wife caused an unusual and strange reaction in her, which made him wonder about her feelings and what was hidden in her past behind this word. He couldn't wait for time to go faster because in a week their wedding was to take place, an event that was of great importance to him and made him impatient. She was already sitting in her wedding dress, almost completely ready to become a bride, and her appearance clearly reflected the anticipation and importance of this coming moment. This wedding was already her second in her life, an experience that left a deep mark and probably influenced her attitude towards marriage and future happiness. The first wedding remained a lonely and empty page in her life, bringing neither joy nor real feelings, only bitterness and disappointment in her soul. She wondered if this marriage would be different, if it would give her the start she had been missing before, or if she would repeat the same mistakes, plunging into the same feelings. At that moment, her fiancé entered the room, and the atmosphere changed dramatically, filling with tension, anticipation, and a slight trepidation before the event. He turned to her, but she was very frightened. The sudden appearance made her heart beat faster, and fear took hold of her completely, as if it had suddenly fallen upon her. She hadn't expected to see him so unexpectedly at all, and this visit had raised many questions inside, starting with the simple, "Why is he here?" and ending with doubts about his intentions. But when she looked at him, she was overcome with real shock. His incredible beauty made her forget about fear and caution, causing deep admiration. He noticed that she had a strange expression on her face, as if she was hiding something or was going through something very important and intimate, not wanting to show it to anyone. The girl could not understand why everything inside her was seething and boiling. She herself could not explain her feelings, as if something was not giving her peace and was getting stronger with each passing moment. Alec realized that here in this environment, she wouldn't be able to cry. There was no privacy or conditions to let her emotions out because there were too many eyes around. Now was not the time for tears, she understood, although her heart was breaking, and she wanted to let go of everything for a moment and give free rein to her feelings. But she stubbornly held back, not giving free rein to weakness. She said that everything was not, so she was just a little worried, trying to somehow justify her condition and not show how hard it really was for her at that moment. He was surprised by this answer, noting that this was already the second wedding, but she was still as nervous as if it were the first time, and this puzzled him a little, and at the same time amused him. She noticed that his jokes were not funny at all, but he laughed at it himself, realizing that he wanted to lighten the mood a little and make her feel better. He thought that after his joke, she calmed down a little, and she herself confirmed this with a silent nod, acknowledging that he had managed to amuse her at least a little. He also asked her to take the ring that he had brought for her, leaving no doubt that it was a very important and meaningful item for them, a symbol of their connection. It was an engagement ring that was meant to be a sign of their promises, but at the same time, it was more than just jewelry. It was a memory and a hope. No matter how frugal her state was, wearing the old wedding ring from the past was impossible. It seemed wrong and unrealistic in the current situation. True, one of the rings was now missing, and this made one think that not everything could be returned and restored, no matter how much one would like to. The Duke said that he was speaking incorrectly, as if correcting himself, and at the same time greeted the lady with a reference expressing some uncertainty and excitement. The gentleman simply sighed, leaving it unanswered because he did not know what to say in response to such confusion and inner doubts that were in the air. No one tried to continue the conversation because the moment had become too tense, and everyone understood that words were of no use. Now they just needed to survive this moment. Olivia thought to herself that the Duke could have spoken directly instead of using such strange expressions as died. It bothered her that he had chosen those particular words when he could have been simpler and more honest. He put a ring on her finger, which was surprisingly comfortable. Olivia noticed this and decided to ask why the ring fit so perfectly, as if it was made especially for her. The Duke replied that this was because he had taken measurements from her fingers beforehand. Olivia was surprised and asked again when he had managed to do this because she did not remember such a moment. He just smiled mysteriously and replied that it was a secret. Such secrecy raised even more questions in her, but the Duke was not going to reveal all his cards. Olivia thought that this was really too suspicious, and she began to doubt his intentions. The mystery around the simple ring seemed inexplicable and strange to her. In addition, the design of the ring itself was unusual and eye-catching. Clearly not just a decoration, but something special with a deep meaning or history. At this point, a servant entered and addressed the Duke with a reminder that it was time to greet the guests. His voice was polite, but insistent, calling for action. The Duke quietly whispered to Olivia that they would definitely see each other later. This added intrigue, hinting that the communication was not over yet. She felt like he was mocking her, playing with her feelings, and causing slight irritation. This attitude was clearly mocking. His cold, indifferent face seemed strangely familiar to her, reminiscent of James, but at the same time a completely different person, hard and unfeeling. Olivia's memory of her mother once telling her that she should be happy and not complain came back to her, making her think about the meaning of those words now. She wondered how her mother would react If she found out that Olivia was going to get married a second time, would she accept this decision or condemn it? Now, as the lady was leaving, Olivia wanted to tell her mother that she was doing everything she could and put an end to this issue, confidently moving forward. She would not miss the opportunity that had appeared like a light in the darkness cutting through her path. This moment was important, and she was going to use it to the maximum without making any mistakes. When the bride's appearance was announced, Olivia felt anxiety growing inside her, along with a desire to find happiness that seemed unattainable to her, but still so necessary. Under all these flowers, decorations, and approval from the Duke, there was a special atmosphere of celebration where everyone seemed to be part of a great game, and she could not remain on the sidelines. The union of the bride and groom was blessed with wishes for a long and happy life together, and these words sounded so sincere that it seemed they could change the course of fate itself. Olivia noticed that the colors of the wedding decorations were unusually expensive and elegant, and thought to herself how much effort and money had been put into this celebration. In a past life, she would have certainly been dumbfounded by such magnificence, but now her gaze was calmer, and she perceived what was happening differently, with a certain degree of detachment. This time, only her husband stood next to her, quietly present, and this added a sense of comfort and support that had not been there before. She deliberately did not invite anyone else, limiting herself to this modest circle in order to avoid unnecessary questions and unforeseen situations. The husband began to talk about the need for money for their youngest daughter's wedding, reminding them that caring for a family always requires material investments. The father, despite the difficult relationship, said that fortunately, the family had the opportunity to help, to take her for the sum of 50,000 gold, and this seemed to be the solution to all problems. But in this life, Olivia was determined to have no more dealings with a man like her father, distancing herself and closing that chapter for herself forever. She thought he was completely useless and didn't deserve a drop of her attention. Every time she saw him, irritation and disappointment grew inside her. For her, he was just an empty shadow, unable to help in anything. As soon as she had a chance, she was going to take her little sister away from him. It was her main task to protect her from this man and take her out from under his influence. She decided that she would not leave her there for a minute longer. The gentleman, her husband, turned to Olivia with a question, noticing that she was lost in thought and not listening. He wanted to understand what was occupying her thoughts, but she immediately understood that now was not the time to explain her feelings and doubts. Olivia felt embarrassed and tense inside, realizing that now was not the time to sort out her feelings and thoughts. She tried to collect her thoughts so as not to show her weakness and to switch her attention to what was happening around her. She said that she now understood what marriage meant and that she was ready to go through with it, but her husband still doubted her sincerity. He thought that she was lying and was actually thinking about another man, not about him. Olivia confidently told her husband that there was nothing like that. She rejected all suspicions and tried to explain that her feelings were not connected with anyone else, although her thoughts were much more complex than he could imagine. In fact, she was not thinking about a man, but about her father, who had left a deep mark on her soul. These thoughts were painful and disturbing for her, causing her heart to clench with uncertainty and regret. The Duke noticed that it was rare for anyone to be able to think of another when he was standing in front of the girl. His words were full of confidence and challenge. He wanted to understand whether her heart was truly free or whether she was simply hiding the truth. It was just unpleasant and offensive to her. She couldn't deny that she felt cornered. Everything that was happening seemed disgusting and unfair to her, as if someone was playing with her feelings and fate. He said that if she really had a lover, and she had chosen him, the Duke, instead, then now was her last chance to show it. It was a kind of test or ultimatum with which he wanted to check her loyalty. The lady was shocked by such words and could not understand why he was talking like that at all. She was overcome with surprise and internal protest because she did not expect to hear such a direct and sharp statement from him. She tried to explain that things were not as he thought, but at that moment, the priest announced that it was time for the oath of allegiance. This moment became a turning point when words and actions were to determine many things. There had been no such ceremony during her last wedding, and now she felt a new pressure and responsibility. This vow seemed to her something serious and obligatory, something that could not be ignored or bypassed. The gentleman looked at her with interest and a smile, as if he was curious to understand how she would react. This smile said that he was not ready to let her go so easily and was going to fight for his right. He said that he was not one to let a girl go if he had her on his heart. These words sounded sincere and firm, showing his intention to hold on to her and not let her go without a fight. After that, he unexpectedly kissed her, confirming his feelings and determination. This kiss was not just a sign of passion, but a symbol of struggle and mutual claims that would affect their relationship for a long time. The Diamond Hall lived up to all expectations. It is now clear why it is so famous and admired by all guests. The atmosphere there was truly extraordinary and impressive. The Duke looked so beautiful and majestic that everyone present simply could not hide their surprise and delight at his appearance and charm. Despite the fact that he was going to get married, many ladies hoped that the Duke would remain that unattainable dream that no one would ever be able to take possession of. The brother, without hiding his emotions, cried at the wedding with Tanya, because finally his beloved nephew decided to tie his life in marriage, which was a very touching moment for the whole family. Whatever the circumstances, the wedding was surprisingly successful and left behind many bright impressions for all the guests. The bride's father, the Viscount, was literally thrown out because his behavior was irritating and inappropriate on such a solemn day. The Duchess of Parnell and her ex-husband's relatives were not present at the celebration, which was noticeably felt in the general mood of the holiday. Despite the absence of some important people, this marriage received the blessings of many influential and respected people in society. The newlyweds were nowhere to be seen, indicating that they had probably already headed back to the estate to begin their life together away from prying eyes. It was believed that this night was to be their wedding night, although everyone knew about his reputation as an impotent man, and this raised many doubts and questions. However, despite the rumors, the Duke kissed her with such passion and skill that it seemed as if all this was far from consistent with the widespread stories about him. If he had really been as he was described, he would certainly have denied these rumors, but in this case there was much to suggest that things were otherwise. The question of whether Ian Tyrone, known as the Eunuch, would be able to spend his wedding night remained the most discussed and intriguing among the guests and nobles. Olivia Florence, now Olivia Tyrone, finally learned what had been worrying and interesting so many people. The truth was revealed to her in its entirety. She was genuinely glad that the wedding was over and that they would now have the opportunity to rest a little and catch their breath after all these events. Taking her hand, he said that it was time for them to go, although it seemed that the day was just beginning and there was still much to do. Olivia noted that he still needed to greet the guests, as this was part of the groom's duties and an important tradition for such an event. James was not present at the previous wedding, but she always approached each guest, listening carefully to their complaints and trying to maintain good relations. If she had not done so, she would certainly have faced insults and discontent from the guests, which could have spoiled the overall impression of the holiday. The second wedding was very complicated, and Olivia felt that she was still very much connected to the past, especially with James's ex-wife, who left behind many secrets and misunderstandings. This event reminded her how much life changes after such a change. The gentleman explained that the final decision on this matter would be left to the emperor, since he was the one who liked to deal with such matters and make important decisions despite all the difficulties of the situation. Olivia noticed that the gentleman did not observe the usual rules of subordination towards the emperor at all, which seemed strange and unusual to her. She could not understand why he had such manners and why he behaved so insolently. The gentleman objected that such a thing should not be said by a man who, at their very first meeting, told her that it was good that she had no parents. It was a sharp and unexpected statement, which justified him in his eyes. Olivia remembered her mistakes, and that she had actually said that if someone didn't have parents, it might even be a good thing in some way, and now she realized how cynical and rude that had sounded. She admitted that she does not understand who the bad person is who could say something like that, because she herself did not want to offend anyone and did not know how to express herself correctly in that situation. Olivia apologized for her behavior explaining that she had been too abrupt and rude without thinking about the feelings of the interlocutor, and realizing that it could have hurt him much more than she had intended. The gentleman then tried to calm her down, saying that everything was actually fine, and that he didn't hold a grudge against her, although his words sounded a little strange and left a feeling of a conflict that was not entirely clear. He admitted that he believes his parents are dead, and this is a difficult topic for him, which he usually does not talk about, but now he decided to share it to explain his behavior and attitude to life. Olivia was very surprised by his confession and asked again to understand what exactly he meant, because such words seemed unexpected and even painful to her, but she wanted to understand the essence. However, the gentleman suddenly went somewhere, leaving her alone with her thoughts and without giving an explanation, so Olivia was at a loss and could not understand what exactly was happening and how all this was connected with their conversations. After that, she looked out into the garden, deep in thought, trying to comprehend what had happened and understand what would happen next. Because the situation seemed too complicated and confusing for her, she asked to wait, because their carriage seemed to be going the wrong way. She wanted to make sure everything was going according to plan and was in no hurry to go anywhere without certainty. But he insisted that this was not the case and that they would not spend the night in the palace. His words were firm, and this left her confused because the plans had changed abruptly. She stayed another week, not expecting such a turn of events. Everything was going differently than she could have imagined, and this made her doubt more and more about what was happening. The emperor gave them a room. He was the one who let them leave early. It was unexpected and showed his involvement, that he really cared and made decisions personally. She quickly noticed that the emperor really cared about his nephew. Perhaps he had some other ulterior motive that she could not yet understand. However, Olivia could not understand what motive could be behind this attention and why the emperor was doing this. Everything seemed incomprehensible and mysterious to her. He asked her to take care of her nephew, which in itself spoke of his great trust and hope in her. It was a serious request that could not be ignored. This nephew was so valuable to him that he almost begged not to abandon him, not to leave him alone in a difficult situation. Such an attitude touched and made him treat him with respect. Today, he will walk very slowly. The whole day is planned in this rhythm, so he will definitely take her in his arms to help and support her on the way. When he did this, she was very scared. She certainly did not expect such a sharp and unexpected turn of events, and this made her think about her next steps. She said they could go slowly without rushing, and that was the only sensible way out of the situation. This approach seemed to her the safest and most comfortable for everyone. Their path turned out to be quite simple. At that moment, they were just going to bed, and that was the main thing that remained to be done. There were no other things to do, only to immerse themselves in peace and allow themselves to rest. His shoulders were broad and strong, and she felt comfortable in his arms. The warmth and protection made her feel safe, allowing her to forget her worries and find peace in his arms. She wondered if this was still the same James she once knew, or if everything had changed and he was a different person now. Her thoughts were in a tangled mess, preventing her from finding an answer and sleeping peacefully. Once in her room, she felt fatigue take over her body. Her muscles demanded rest, but thoughts and worries were still buzzing in her head, preventing her from relaxing and calmly falling asleep. Tiredness and tension gradually left her, leaving room for a slight relief after all the worries and fuss that accompanied this busy day. The body gradually relaxed, preparing for rest, and the mind began to let go of worries. The maid quietly invited her mistress to come with her, showing tender concern, and as if sensing that she needed peace and attention after many events. Her soft words created an atmosphere of comfort and security so necessary after a long time on her feet. The desire to quickly surrender to sleep was so strong that time dragged on slowly, and thoughts constantly returned to the moment when it would finally be possible to close my eyes and forget at least for a few hours. A loud announcement was heard in the palace that they had to wait a little while because the gentleman would soon appear. This made it clear that events were moving forward, and no delays would last long. Everything was proceeding as planned. The maid also conveyed congratulations to her mistress on her recent marriage, sincerely wishing her happiness and well-being in this new stage of her life. These words sounded like a warm reminder of the importance of change and new opportunities. Olivia no longer reacted to what was happening around her. She just quietly lay down, allowing her body to finally relax and regain strength after a long and stressful day filled with experiences and events. She felt like her life was starting to unfold like a fairy tale, bright, eventful, and full of opportunities that had previously seemed unattainable and inaccessible in her old world. Suddenly, she felt something unusual with the blanket. A slight, barely noticeable, but disturbing feeling, as if some unknown anxiety or disturbance of the usual order had arisen around her. Carefully lifting the blanket, she saw something unexpected that made her wonder. At first, she couldn't understand what exactly was out of the ordinary, why it caused such internal dissonance. She couldn't understand what had happened to her clothes, why they looked different, and why the surrounding space suddenly seemed alien, as if she had ended up in another world, unlike the one she was used to. Now it became clear why she had been dressed so carefully and neatly. Everything had been planned with great care to hide something important, perhaps to protect her from prying eyes or unexpected events. The clothes they put on her were so vulgar that Olivia herself did not expect such a contrast with her inner style and feelings, which further increased the feeling of discomfort and misunderstanding. She wrapped herself in a blanket and decided that she absolutely had to figure out what was happening, understand the reasons for this strange state, and try to return everything to its usual and safe order. Even though they were probably just getting ready to go to bed, she had this uneasy feeling that someone might sneak up on her, violating her personal space. At that moment, a gentleman entered the room, and Olivia immediately felt embarrassed and confused by his sudden appearance in such a situation, which further aggravated her internal tension. It seemed to her that the maids had specially chosen such clothes for him to create the effect of surprise and to provoke a certain reaction in her, as if it were a carefully planned move in this strange game. At that moment, she was so upset and confused that she didn't really notice anything around her. She just turned away and decided that the best way out was to try to sleep. However, he came unexpectedly close to her and quietly said her name right next to her ear. This whisper caused the girl to be very frightened, and at the same time, an unexpected surge of excitement, which made it difficult for her to collect her thoughts. Her fear was so obvious and noticeable that the man himself was surprised at how much his presence and whisper could affect her. He did not expect that such a simple gesture would cause such a reaction in her. The man stood in front of her, with his chest open, which added to the girl's embarrassment, because she understood that it was too revealing and inappropriate at that moment. Her internal tension only increased from such closeness. At some point, she decided not to look at him, trying to hide her feelings. She tried to focus on the thought that it would be best to just try to sleep and get away from unnecessary emotions and inconveniences. He quietly asked what she was doing now, as if guessing that the girl was just going to sleep tired from everything that had happened during the day. His voice was soft but with a slight undertone of interest. The girl admitted that she was really tired and wanted to rest, thanked him for his attention, and wished him pleasant dreams. She hoped that her words would not be taken the wrong way and would remain just politeness. In response, he asked again with surprise why exactly she wished him pleasant dreams, as if he did not fully understand the meaning of her words or was trying to find some hidden hint in them which caused a slight tension. She tried to calm herself down, convincing herself that it was all an accident and the man did not pose any danger to her. The girl decided to simply forget this moment and not attach much importance to it. She knew he was impotent, and this knowledge helped her to block out unwanted thoughts and feelings, preventing them from taking root and preventing herself from becoming too deeply involved in what was happening. However, he insisted that she open her eyes, reminding her that there was some unfinished business between them that required their joint attention and resolution, as if an important duty hung between them. Olivia had expected that unfinished business meant more than just formal obligations to serve guests or follow protocol, and she felt the seriousness of his words. The man stood up, addressing her with her formal title of Duchess of Parnell, and asked how she felt about her role and the responsibilities that came with that status, as if trying to understand her inner feelings about their situations. She replied that she understood and accepted the law according to which all weddings take place without a marriage relationship, but at the same time retain their legal status. At that very moment, She realized that by unfinished business, he meant their wedding night, which they still had to experience together, and which seemed like something important and decisive for their relationship. Deep down, he was afraid that she might abandon him, go to another man, because loneliness and emptiness seemed the most terrible thing to him, and he did not want to be left alone, not to find support and warmth. Because of this, he carefully hugged her, pressed her as close to himself as possible, and softly kissed her on the cheek, trying to convey all his care, support, and tenderness through this simple gesture so that she felt his presence. Suddenly, he unexpectedly kissed her on the lips. Olivia was surprised and embarrassed by this act, which became an unexpected manifestation of feelings for her. She did not expect such a sudden impulse on his part. He explained that he wanted to sort this issue out before the wedding, so that no doubts or omissions would darken their future union and spoil the trust that they had already begun to build together. Olivia was very embarrassed and immediately reminded him that he was impotent, which sounded strange and even offensive, considering all their closeness and the mutual feelings that she felt in their relationship. He immediately replied that he had never said anything like that, and completely disagreed with such an accusation, considering all these rumors to be empty talk that had nothing to do with the truth. She reminded him that it was him that was the subject of rumors, that he had failed at a banquet 2 years ago, and that everyone had talked about it behind his back, which was damaging his reputation and creating unnecessary tension. He explained that he simply had no interest in that girl, and that was normal, because every person reacts differently to others. Not all situations necessarily have to be the same or significant. Olivia was surprised and asked why he had even touched on the subject, why he was so worried about these rumors, and why he wanted to know her attitude towards them if he himself considered them empty talk. He admitted that it was all a lie, and he shouldn't have gotten involved in these conversations at all, because they made no sense and only prevented them from focusing on what was most important. He tried to switch her attention and distract her from these unpleasant thoughts, but she stubbornly did not want to let go of this topic and continued to persistently discuss it as if she was trying to get to the bottom of it. Olivia stated directly that she did not want to have children and was not going to change her mind despite all his attempts to convince her. For her, this was a fundamental and important decision. Then she added that she was not going to give birth, but he simply came up to her and kissed her, as if he wanted to smooth over all doubts and fears with his touch, to show that their feelings were more important to him. He assured her that everything was fine, and Olivia had to understand that what was more important to him was their love and mutual understanding, and not some conventions or other people's fears that weren't worth their attention. He asked her not to worry and not to think about it, because he didn't need children either, and this united their views on the future. He chose not to clarify the situation, even when the brand of a eunuch spread around him and people began to whisper, not trying to figure out the truth. He remained silent and calm. He picked her up in his arms, holding her tightly, as if he wanted to protect her from the world. His embrace was strong and warm, leaving her no chance to escape. The lady felt that all these evil rumors about the eunuch were nothing more than empty talk that had nothing to do with reality and truth. The Duke tried to hide his resentment, but it was impossible not to notice that she really did have a good figure, which attracted attention and aroused interest. Olivia noted that it was not so important now, but she was curious about why a certain place was so noticeably protruding, causing her questions and surprise. The gentleman explained that nothing could be done about it. It was simply a physiological feature that he could not influence and which was not worth discussing. Now she clearly understood why His Majesty had temporarily forgotten his usual severity and allowed himself to utter words that would have been considered unacceptable and unacceptable in society. It was a moment when the personal was felt stronger than the rules. In any case, she wasn't sure that she would be able to accept all of this at once, so she preferred to keep a safe distance for now and not rush into a decision thinking about what was happening and her feelings in silence. She made an attempt to move away and walk away to take a step back, but he did not let her go, grabbing her hand tightly and not letting go, as if not wanting to let her go even for a moment, holding her close and intentionally. He reminded her of what he had already said before, how much she was desired and dear to him, that in his eyes and heart she remained the only most important and irreplaceable woman in his life. Therefore, according to him, she should not waste precious time on doubts and worries, because she is truly important and needed by him. And he experienced these feelings sincerely and without the slightest doubt. After these words, a kiss arose between them, filled with both tenderness and passion, which left them both speechless and with a tremor in their souls, as if time had stopped for a moment. The next morning, she woke up feeling sleep-deprived and tired, as if the night had passed too quickly, filled with stormy emotions and experiences that were still on her mind. Meanwhile, the gentleman was preparing to leave for work, carefully putting on his clothes and getting ready to meet a new day full of work worries and duties that required his full dedication. She accused him of deception in her heart, feeling a mixture of inner disappointment and confusion, after everything that had happened, unable to immediately understand what had really happened. Moreover, she did not hesitate to call him a fool, a chatterbox, and even a bastard, openly expressing her emotions and reproaches towards him, splashing out all the accumulated pain and resentment. However, she noted that he had finally put an end to the conversations and rumors that had previously bothered them both. The gentleman replied that he said all this because he was not interested in the opinions of all the women around him, because he was not an animal and knew how to control his feelings. Come to think of it, Olivia wasn't particularly polite to him either, but despite that, he was kind and patient with her, which seemed unusual. That's why he decided to find out why she thought he was acting so strangely, and wanted to understand her opinion on the matter. She thought about it, realizing that it was indeed strange how a man who had lived alone for 20 years could be so easily influenced by hers. He recalled that she had been rather rude in her conversation with her, which could well explain his strange behavior, since people react to disrespect differently, and he was clearly surprised and confused. In the end, one could come to only one conclusion. He really was interested in her. He liked her. And it was this feeling that explained his oddities and uncertainty in communicating with her. He did not hide his emotions and directly admitted that he really liked her, speaking sincerely, without guile, that his feelings were real and serious. Olivia wanted to figure out why everything happened this way, because it was their first meeting, and she did not expect such a turn of events, which seemed unexpected and somewhat strange to hers. He said that what first caught his attention was her face. It became the starting point, which was followed by a growing interest in her and a desire to get to know her better. He was especially captivated by her eyes, which seemed to speak more than words, and then he paid attention to the conditions she proposed, and this further increased his sympathy. He also highlighted her lack of desire to have children, which was important to him, emphasizing her strong character confidence and the fact that she did not show greed, which made her special in his eyes. In addition, he noted her ability to handle internal affairs without unnecessary complications, which was of great importance to him, and spoke of her organization and independence. Olivia was surprised by what she heard, and decided to test how he would react to a hypothetical situation. If she stole all his property, what would he do in this case, trying to understand the depth of his feelings? She realized how difficult it was to judge a person based on the first meeting, and he asked if she thought she treated him like a child. In any case, he liked everything. Even though she was significantly older than him in age, this fact was obvious and could not be ignored. Her maturity and experience stood out noticeably, which greatly influenced their relationship and perception of each other. She made her last important decision regarding her salary while enjoying her favorite tea, smoky Earl Grey, which always brought her peace and confidence in the correctness of her choice. This tea was a real favorite for her, so he watched with interest to see if she could now trust him completely, or if doubts would still prevent him from understanding her true feelings. If she still had any doubts, she had the opportunity to check everything right here and now, without putting it off until later, to make sure of the sincerity and honesty of what was happening. Olivia asked him to wait a bit, and asked him what he was doing in the middle of this desert, as if he was lost and didn't know where to go or what to do next in this deserted place. She admitted that she was very hungry after a long day, and suggested that they start by having something to eat first, to restore their strength and be ready for further action. He replied that he had no choice, as he could not allow his wife to remain hungry, considering such behavior unacceptable and a manifestation of care and respect. He promised that he would be back soon, in just 10 minutes, to get ready and arrange everything necessary so that they could have breakfast in peace and continue their conversation. He also promised to have breakfast with her, and had already called the maids to help with cooking and cleaning to create a cozy and comfortable atmosphere. Unlike many others, he did not run away like a cowardly animal, but stayed showing courage. The maids said that they would help the Duchess change her clothes and tidy herself up. While the maids were helping her dress, one of them noticed obvious marks from the Duke's hands on the lady's neck, which immediately attracted their attention and caused concern. This fact embarrassed her a little, and she felt awkward, realizing that her behavior in the presence of the lady was not entirely correct and could arouse suspicion. She said that she had an outfit already prepared for her specially chosen and ready to wear. This was an important moment, and it took some time to prepare so that everything would look perfect and suit her style. Perhaps they should have gone out for a while, so she could change her clothes in peace without feeling the prying eyes, and take her time to tidy herself up before the next meeting. When the lady looked in the mirror, she noticed that the Duke had left many marks on her clothes and skin, bright and noticeable, which were difficult to miss even at a cursory glance. The Duke had indeed had a profound effect on her, leaving marks in such numbers and forms that she was amazed at how deeply it had manifested itself on her body and appearance. Moreover, he also hinted that he was ready to repeat everything again, as if he was not going to stop there, causing her a mixture of embarrassment and surprise. She seriously thought that she would die of shame, because the maid probably already knew about what was happening and could congratulate her in every possible way, which only added to the tension and excitement. The Duke was clearly reluctant to let her go, speaking of eternal love, and seemed to think that she would again give in to his requests and allow him to be so close again. Later, they entered the room where the Emperor was already present. He greeted her with obvious joy, sincerely pleased with the appearance of his daughter-in-law and showing a warm attitude. A strange feeling of déjà vu arose inside her, as if she had already experienced this moment, and everything that was happening seemed like a repetition of some important episode from the past. The Emperor was genuinely glad to see her, as if he was receiving her appearance with hope and relief, which betrayed the deep feelings and importance of the moment. He hoped that the night had passed peacefully and well, for her asking about her condition and wanting her to rest and gain strength for further events. She did not understand at all why her husband did not tell her in advance that the Emperor had invited them to dine together, because it seemed like an important and expected meeting. After these words, the Emperor kissed her, which caused her great embarrassment. She was not ready for such a demonstration of feelings and was sincerely surprised by his actions. There was no official connotation or authority to this act, so she had not expected such unexpected openness and spontaneity from him. The Emperor explained that her gaze was clearly asking him for a kiss, as if they understood each other without words, and could convey their feelings with just one look. She captured the moment, and the Emperor simply glowed with happiness, displaying genuine joy and warmth that could be felt even in the smallest details of his behavior. He said that they were perfect for each other, as if they were made together, and that he himself was afraid to even look at them. It was so impressive and awe-inspiring. He had decided to skip breakfast today. Thoughts of them had filled his mind completely, and his appetite had simply disappeared. Inwardly, he was too immersed in the events to think about food, his soul tossing between anxiety and anticipation. Duke Leo did not say a word because he did not care, and he chose the role of a silent observer, watching what was happening carefully, without interfering or showing any emotion. It was noticeable that he had already eaten, although no one said so directly, but from his calm appearance and measured movements, it was obvious. He did not feel hungry because he was taking care of something else. The Emperor noted that if the guests had arrived on time, he would have definitely dined with them, but now, due to their lateness, there was no longer such an opportunity. Time had passed, and plans had to be changed. He added that breakfast was not necessary for him because Svetochka was very tired and weak that day, and caring for her came first for him, leaving all formalities behind. She apologized for the delay, explaining her tardiness as a sudden weakness, and sent her greetings to everyone, along with an apology for not being able to come on time, showing sincerity and respect. The Emperor said that he did not want to reproach or blame her in any way because he fully understood how difficult the situation was, and appreciated her efforts and honesty. He didn't even think of condemning her, but on the contrary, he was immensely grateful that she accepted him, despite the fact that he was tied down by his studies, and remained only thanks to the remnants of his family, which made their relationship fragile. He often thought that she could run away at night because he was a eunuch, and considered himself useless to anyone, which filled him with fears and anxiety, forcing him to constantly doubt himself and their future. These fears haunted him even in his sleep, in nightmares where he saw escapes and losses again and again, experiencing all the pain of loss anew, and fearing a repetition of fate. So he decided to send them a message early in the morning to calm everyone down and let them know that there was no need to worry, that he was taking control of the situation and was keeping a close eye on everything. He assured them that there was no need to worry about trifles and that he would do everything possible to ensure that no one was hurt, promising protection and care to keep them calm during this difficult time. He promised not to interfere or disturb them, even if they remained in the bedroom until the evening, showing complete patience and understanding for their desires and mood at this difficult moment. The Duke felt that sometimes it was indeed better to remain silent in order to avoid unnecessary words and possible conflicts, especially in such a difficult and tense situation when every word could be misinterpreted. He stressed that he was forced to interrupt the conversation because he was currently talking to his fiancée and could not allow himself to be distracted by extraneous topics that would only complicate the situation and cause confusion. She was struck by how different the emperor was from the ideas she had previously had about him. His behavior and words shocked her, forcing her to reconsider her own expectations and views. After this, she turned her attention to her husband, carefully observing his reaction, trying to understand how he would perceive what he had heard and what he now felt in his soul and thoughts. Her husband looked clearly angry, his face flushed with strong emotion, and she immediately realized that something serious had happened that had deeply affected him and caused an internal conflict. If he had not had the status of emperor, he would have long ago received what he deserved for such behavior, but his high title reliably protected him from any possible consequences and punishments. He inquired how long they intended to stay in the palace, hinting that perhaps they should be given a separate mansion for at least a week to provide more privacy and comfort. The Duke announced that they were leaving today, and Olivia was genuinely glad of this decision because it meant the end of an unwanted stay. The emperor could not understand why they were so quick to leave. He clearly had not expected such haste. It seemed to him that the guests were supposed to stay longer, and he was puzzled why they were changing their plans so abruptly. The Duke explained that he was obliged to send them on their honeymoon, and that was the reason for their early departure. According to him, circumstances did not allow delay, and it required immediate fulfillment. The emperor was very surprised by what he heard. This was clearly not part of his plans. He did not expect that preparations for a honeymoon would cause such a quick separation, which made him think. He noted that despite the fact that his wife was very beautiful, he still had to stay and attend tomorrow's conference. It was an important event, and no one was exempted from it. Meanwhile, the Duke said that he was about to leave and suggested that everyone talk as much as they liked, but time was running out, and it was necessary to prepare for departure. He said goodbye and emphasized that he was looking forward to tomorrow's conference, emphasizing the importance of the upcoming event and the desire to see everyone again at the right time. The emperor decided to slip out of the room unnoticed so as not to delay the others, but the Duke considered this vulgar behavior, which caused a little tension. Olivia asked for a quieter tone, as such words were an insult to the imperial family, and reminded everyone of the respect that the highest ranks deserved. She also gently closed the Duke's mouth to stop his objections, and he smiled in response, accepting her warning without conflict. He suddenly touched her hand with his tongue, which caused Olivia to suddenly panic. Such a bold and unexpected gesture seemed inappropriate to her in this situation, as if violating the unspoken rules between them. She immediately removed her hand, expressing her displeasure with her stern look, and gesture for him not to repeat this action again, showing that she did not like this behavior and required an immediate stop. In response to her seriousness, he only laughed, as if playing with her reaction, not taking the prohibition too seriously, and allowing himself to behave a little boldly, as if testing the limits of her patience. He took her hand in his again and joked with a slight smile that the food was already cold, hinting that it was time to stop talking and start dinner, trying to diffuse the situation with light humor and informality. He also noted that they would have to wait for everything to be recooked because none of the dishes were suitable for a comfortable snack, creating a wait and some delay in their time together. He then hugged her and asked her if they would like to eat comfortably in the room, offering a more private and comfortable option for spending time together. Olivia didn't see anything wrong with them just eating together, nothing else happening. It seemed like it would be a normal, simple breakfast, unremarkable and calm. He picked her up in his arms, as if it was natural, and said that it would be more comfortable for them to walk this way, as if it was the most normal way for the two of them to move at the moment. Already in their room, they became closer again, and they did not put it off, continuing what they had started, not paying attention to anything around them, immersed in each other. She called him an animal and accused him of public fraud, because she did not expect such behavior, and believed that he had crossed all boundaries of decency at that moment. She got married to build a normal life, not to become part of someone's game or deception. But now the situation has turned out completely differently than she expected. Earlier, he had started kissing her, and she had noticed that he had said it with some kind of justification, as if they had only come here for breakfast and there shouldn't be anything extras. He confirmed his words, adding that they have a little time before the food is ready, and therefore they can relax a little without rushing anywhere. He explained that they would start with her, as he believed that attention and care should be directed primarily at her. This was an important condition for the further plan and development of events. She felt like a real fool, because she believed him unconditionally, although her inner voice told her that everything was far from being as simple and honest as it seemed at first glance. Doubts did not leave her even after the explanations. He said that she was the first person to take the initiative and try to improve their relationship by taking a step forward. This was his explanation for why they would act this way and start with her. The thought flashed through her mind that he might be hiding something, that he knew something important that could have a significant impact on their further actions and the outcome of the situation. This knowledge was a mystery to her. She knew that under no circumstances could Romeo be allowed to suffer because of all this. His safety and well-being were her top priority, and this understanding guided all her actions and decisions. She's here now because she asked him to spread that song, hoping that it would somehow help change the situation or attract the attention of the right people. He offered to either return home or accept his offer to stay a few more days, increasing the time of stay and the chance to fix something. Olivia said they were going home and suggested that the reason for the constant intimate mood around was because it was a honeymoon room and the atmosphere encouraged that. She thought that they should immediately return to the ducal residence to stop all this and return to normal life. He said that if he thought about it, she was a little upset and that they should stay here a little longer to think things over and make the right decision. She was very scared and immediately expressed her disagreement because she could not accept what was happening and felt confusion and anxiety inside from his persistence. She had absolutely no idea who he was and why he was constantly pestering her because his behavior remained a mystery to her and caused confusion. She tried to ask him to wait a little, as if clinging to his shirt, hoping to buy time to at least somehow figure out the situation. At this point, she suggested that they enter into some kind of agreement that could bring clarity and order to their relationship. His surprise was obvious, and he immediately asked her to explain what exactly she meant by such an unusual proposal. She made it clear that, firstly, he must use contraception to avoid any unwanted consequences. Secondly, she insisted that they both remain faithful to each other throughout their marriage, maintaining trust and respect. He took her by the necklace, smiled, and said that it was this point about fidelity that he wanted to ask first himself. He then asked her to write down the rest of the conditions so that she could continue to voice her thoughts and demands. The most important thing, in her opinion, was to determine how many times a week they would spend time together in the marital bed. She asked cautiously, how about once a week, thinking it was a reasonable and modest enough option? He thought she was joking, but she was serious and said she wasn't joking at all, insisting on her own. All this left her in a state of confusion and inner turmoil because she still could not understand where all this would lead. To tell the truth, she was scared because she didn't know who she would have to sleep with and how their relationship would actually turn out. He was, of course, a good man who did not hurt her or try to torture her, but the fear remained inside. She didn't even know how to express her thoughts correctly, but suddenly, she realized that now she would be able to say everything she thought and felt. She promised to play the role of his wife faithfully, so as not to create unnecessary problems and not to worry him too much. It was important to her to keep everything under control and show her respect. She wasn't going to push him away, although she knew that if they had a relationship a certain number of times, it would be better and more convenient for both of them. This approach seemed to her the most reasonable and fair. He hugged her tightly, saying that relationships weren't all about the physical side. For him, feelings and mutual understanding were more important than just a formality imposed by someone. In his opinion, there was no need to force each other to do something as if fulfilling a duty. He believed that coercion in love was unacceptable and only spoiled everything that could be between them. He didn't want to cause her mental suffering or torment her with doubts and fears. It was more important for him to preserve her inner peace and self-confidence. His wish was simple. He wanted her to live happily and enjoy every moment of her life without feeling any sadness or anxiety because of the two of them. No matter what might happen, he will never make her afraid or tremble in fear because it destroys trust and harmony between people. He believed that coercion for the sake of fulfilling marital duty would not lead to anything good, but would only destroy the relationship and make it artificial and empty. He asked her to trust him, assuring her that everything would be fine and that she could not worry about what lay ahead. He was willing to wait until her pain and anxiety subsided without rushing things or pressuring her to let things happen at her own pace. He asked her not to worry or be anxious, trying with his calmness and support to instill in her confidence that together they would overcome all difficulties. She noted that they would slightly change the last point of their agreement, arranging everything so that they would both be comfortable and calm. It seems that this was his original goal, to make their life together easier and freer from unnecessary tension. He wondered who could have instilled in her such a deep fear that prevented her from being truly free and happy with him. He supposed it might have been her father, a man who might have instilled in her a lot of doubts and rules that she couldn't cope with. Or it could have been her ex-husband who left a trail of pain behind. Maybe she had someone else who hurt her, but she said she didn't have that person. He was very happy precisely because of his jealousy, which was the strongest thing in him. This character trait often influenced his actions and thoughts, making him nervous without reason and controlling the situation around him. James Parnell was at the academy, deep in his studies, when someone unexpectedly approached him. He looked up and saw a stranger, which caused him a slight surprise and curiosity. Turning around, he noticed a blonde girl who looked hungry and a little lost. Her gaze was insistent, but at the same time humble, as if she was looking for help or advice in this large and strange place. James was surprised when the girl asked him if he could tell her where exactly the entrance ceremony was. She didn't know where to go and really hoped for his help addressing him politely. He replied that the ceremony was most likely taking place in that direction, pointing with his hand. His voice was calm and confident, although he himself was not entirely sure of the exact location. The girl sincerely thanked him for his help and headed in the direction he had indicated. He remained watching her, hoping that he had given her the right advice and that she would quickly find the right place. James hoped he didn't smell too much of sweat, as he had just come back from training and was a bit tired. It was important for him to make a good impression on those around him, especially on new acquaintances. He was curious about who this girl was, because he was unsociable and did not often start conversations with strangers. The interest pushed him to try to find out more about her. Although he was not used to such displays of curiosity, James overcame himself and decided to find out the name of that girl, despite his shyness and inner doubts. He wanted to know who he had just met and what she did. The girl had been here at the academy for about half a month, which helped him find out her name and learn a little about her, with great difficulty. The process was not quick, but he managed to achieve results. Her name was Olivia Florence, and she was studying accounting. James remembered this information because he found it important and interesting, and he began to pay more attention to it. Already during the war, James slept in his bed and recalled moments of his youth and first love, which left a deep mark on his soul and mind. These memories accompanied him even on the most difficult days. Later, he was wounded, which affected his future life and service. This event changed a lot in him, forced him to rethink his views and values, as well as his attitude to the world around him. The servant was very happy when he saw that Master James had recovered from a serious illness or injury. His devotion and care were evident in every action he took around him. He also warned that the gentleman should not make any sudden movements so as not to harm himself and not to provoke complications. Taking care of his health was extremely important at this moment. James asked how long he had been unconscious and was told it had been about a week. He was surprised to realize how long he had been unconscious and how much strength he had yet to regain. Although all the spies had been captured this time, the Duke really felt like he was on edge. His insides were clenched with tension, as if the danger was still somewhere nearby. He began to remember how he had to fight these spies, cunning, cautious like ghosts. Each time they penetrated deeper, and it became more difficult to find them. Suddenly, a man hit him in the back from the side, using a duck as a weapon. It was strange and absurd, but the pain almost made him lose his balance. He had no idea how many spies had managed to infiltrate their ranks. And yet, thanks to the Duke's quick reaction, most of them were exposed in time, and a catastrophe was avoided. Fortunately, the situation was not as dangerous as he had feared. It was a border zone where conflicts with foreign powers were constantly flaring up, and tension was common. This irritating battlefield had been the site of minor but constant skirmishes for decades. His recent injury, in fact, had been sustained during the capture of one of the spies. That spy, despite the situation, continued to secretly transmit important information to the enemy. He acted quietly, carefully, and only chance helped expose him. Then the Duke had a dream about the past. It contained fragments of memories and vague feelings. He wondered how his wife was living now, whether everything was well with her, whether she felt lonely. He noticed that the ring was missing from his finger and asked the butler where it could have gone. He found this alarming, as the ring was an important symbol of his marriage. In this borderland, almost no one knew that the Duke had a ring. Few people were interested in such personal things, and he himself rarely raised the subject. The military, especially swordsmen, did not wear rings. They could get in the way during battle. Because of this, rings were rare here. Almost no one used them. But James never took off his wedding ring, even during the most intense battles. For him, it was not just jewelry, but a personal promise. He never saw his wife's face, but he remained faithful. Perhaps he simply treasured the word he had given, because his bright soul did not allow him to betray his feelings. He said the ring was so worn that it eventually cracked all, because he never took it off. Even in the heat of battle, craftsmen are currently working on restoring the damaged part. He was haunted by a strange, heavy feeling. Perhaps it was not only the fresh wound that was to blame, but also the general tension of the last few days, which was pressing and giving him no peace. Merritt also noticed that he had almost missed something important. He had been given letters. He had only just remembered them, as if his memory had been deliberately pushing them away. He immediately decided that these were letters from his wife and began to read them, but the handwriting was not hers. The letters turned out to be from his 3 mothers, which caused him slight surprise. Among the bundles, he found another letter, this time from the imperial family. He was interested in the purpose for which such important persons had written to him, but Olivia couldn't understand why the imperial family would send him a personal letter. Everything seemed very strange, and the situation was getting more complicated with each passing minute. When he read what was written, it was as if he had been struck by an electric shock. He was in shock. The words written on the yellow paper fell like snow on his head and destroyed his peace. He flushed with anger. The servant standing next to him did not understand the reason for such a sudden change. Just a moment ago, everything was calm, and now the silence was pierced by rage. The servant glanced at the letter and read it out loud. It mentioned a prophecy related to the dissolution of the marriage. This made her frown and think. He couldn't understand why this break had happened. Everything seemed unexpected and implausible, as if there was someone's will behind it all and not circumstances. The servant, hearing the question, was noticeably embarrassed and hesitated, not knowing whether he should open up to his master. He felt that perhaps he should not remain silent, but he still hesitated. The master guessed that the servant might be aware of something important, but was hiding it. He did not want to press, but he felt that he was hiding something and keeping it to himself. Then the servant confessed that everything he had heard seemed to him to be just stupid rumors. That was why he had not told the master about it beforehand, so as not to embarrass him. However, the lady did not understand at all what rumors were being discussed. Everything that was happening seemed too confusing and unexpected to her, and she demanded clarification. The servant was at a loss as to how exactly to tell her about this. He felt awkward about raising a topic that could arouse strong emotions and escalate the situation. Finally, he added cautiously, people had begun to discuss rumors that her wife and Duke Ian Tyrone were allegedly engaged in secret meetings and close relationships. Moreover, the emperor unexpectedly intervened in this beginning to very actively promote the strengthening of their possible union, as if he supported the very idea of such a marriage. It was Duke Ian Tyrone. She meant the very man she had previously respected. But now there were some very controversial conversations and gossip about him. All this was puzzling because he was a eunuch, and such rumors seemed completely devoid of logic and sense. The servant did not know how to react to this. Moreover, no official papers were signed annulling her marriage to James, meaning that legally Olivia remained his legal wife. He read a letter that came from one of the mothers-in-law. It said that Olivia was a vile woman who had no place in the family, and they allegedly drove her out themselves. In addition, the letter contained hints that the Parnell family intended to return all the money previously transferred to the Florence family upon marriage. Despite all this, James did not attach much importance to what had happened. He concentrated on his duties and continued to guard the border with diligence. He tore the letter up in fury, as if each line only fueled his anger. His face flushed, and his eyes flared with anger, barely contained by hurt and irritation. Meanwhile, Olivia, trying not to attract attention, left the room and headed accompanied by her husband to where she could finally breathe out, hidden from prying eyes. At the threshold, they were already met by servants, lined up in a dignified and respectful manner. Everyone bowed to Olivia, showing respect, and thereby emphasizing her new status. The sight of a large number of servants at the entrance suddenly reminded her of the days she had once lived here in different circumstances and in a completely different world. But now she had the right to leave the past behind. Everything that had previously tormented her had to remain in her memory as something distant and no longer important. It's time to start life anew, in a new home, with other people in a different atmosphere, free from old bonds and pain. Now she has a chance to build something different, something of her own, albeit still uncertain, but having the right to exist and hope. As they slowly walked down the corridor, the Duke turned to Olivia, wanting to show his concern and support her in this difficult moment for her. He thought she should rest a little and perhaps sit with a cup of tea in the garden, where everything was calm and peaceful. However, Olivia replied that she would prefer to just sleep because fatigue had fallen upon her so strongly that it left no strength for either conversation or a walk. He asked with interest whether her room had already been tidied up, but Olivia cut him off abruptly, asking him not to speak ambiguously to her anymore. He hastened to assure her that everything was arranged, everything was ready. They were now home, and she had nothing to worry about. Everything would be fine. But Olivia walked away from him, declaring coldly that she was not feeling well at all, and that nothing inside her felt at home, as he said. In the agreement between them, everything was different, and it was precisely this lie that was now throwing her off balance, making her angry. He replied that the exact dates had not yet been finalized, hinting that much remained open despite previous words. She sternly asked him to stop making stupid jokes and not to try to approach her anymore, as if he was trying to keep his distance, as if he was violating the boundaries of her personal space. She told him outright that he should never come closer than 2 meters, as if there was now an invisible wall between them. Before leaving, the gentleman dropped a phrase that everything would become clear by dinner, hinting at some future conversation or events that would take place in the evening. Then she looked at her mistress with concern, asking if Lady Liana was all right, as if she saw something worried or unhealthy in her. Olivia assured everyone with a slight smile that she was indeed fine without showing a drop of excitement, although everything inside was trembling. At the same time, she admitted to herself that she had been wrong to believe his story about him being a eunuch, a stupidity to which she had so easily succumbed. If things continue like this, It will be incredibly difficult for her to lead a normal life without feeling constant pressure and anxiety. Everything was so confusing and unpleasant that she involuntarily blushed and became embarrassed, not knowing how to react correctly. At this moment, the maid handed over a letter addressed to the lady, which she had to read immediately in order to understand the essence of what was happening. Olivia was very surprised to hear about the letter, and even asked again if she had heard wrong, since she had not expected any news for a long time. She realized that the letter most likely came from her father, since only he could send something so unexpected at such a time. At last it arrived, the very message she had secretly feared and waited for, as if she had sensed its arrival. It stated that the funds received after the marriage with the Duke were confiscated by decision of the council. The letter stated that their family was on the verge of extinction, and now Olivia was obliged to immediately intervene and settle everything. Of course, it was a letter from her father, and it had the same tone as before. Orders, pressure, lack of concern. Be that as it may, this man always remained worthless, full of empty vanity, and eventually brought things to absolute collapse. All this only aggravated the family's debts, and although she felt sorry for him as a human being, she still clearly saw all his guilt. Their family was deep in debt and now faced disaster. Even the exact amount of debt was not fully known. He was constantly worried that any similar situations in the future could ruin the reputation of the Duke of Parnell, and therefore put their entire family at risk. Not only did he use her to cover his debt, but he went further and sold Olivia's younger sister to some drug dealer, and now both are in danger. Luckily, Olivia went back in time 20 years ago, and now she has the opportunity to intervene and change everything to save her little sister. Father had to call a spade, even if it was hard for him to admit the truth. After all, the debt was not due to Olivia, but to his own actions. In the letter, Olivia wrote directly that it no longer concerns her, even if he dies. She asked not to send her any more such excuses and pleas. After this letter, she asked the maid to send both letters back to the Florence estate. If she is now 20, then Annie is only 14 years old. In that past life, her younger sister was kind, trusting, and resourceful. That's why Olivia decided it was her responsibility to pull her out of that nightmare. At the Florenz mansion, the father became furious, deciding that everything that was happening was nothing less than a curse that had been haunting their family for more than one generation. Since the contract with the brother was terminated, all funds received during this transaction were subject to complete confiscation under the new terms. The mother-in-law hoped that he would manage to settle everything as quickly as possible because she blamed everything that was happening only on the whims and thoughtless actions of her daughter. No one even imagined that she would actually enter into a full-fledged marriage, and none of them said a word, as if everyone had fallen silent before the inevitable event, accepting it silently and without objection. No one thought that he would have to endure such humiliation to endure all this without the possibility of objecting, as if he were a prisoner of circumstances that he could not change or avoid in any way. Previously, she had claimed that she would carry out her father's will, follow his orders without hesitation, as if her own opinions and desires had no bearing on this decision. But in reality, it turned out that she was completely ungrateful, did not appreciate what was done for her, and did not understand how hard he tried for her and her future. There was a sudden knock at the door, and he quickly asked what they wanted, although he had given clear orders not to disturb him for any reason, expecting his order to be carried out. After all, it was he who ordered that he not be disturbed unless absolutely necessary, wishing to remain calm and focused on his affairs without unnecessary distractions. Annie reported that a letter had arrived from the last, and it was this news that had broken his solitude, causing him to pay attention to an unexpected event that could change the course of things. In response, he waved his hand in irritation and reminded that he had already told him to leave everything for later so as not to distract him from more important matters, trying to brush off the news. However, noticing the seal on the letter, he became interested and asked who the sender was, because it was this detail that could explain a lot and change his attitude towards the message he received. The girl explained that the letter had been sent by Olivia's sister, and this information instantly changed the atmosphere, arousing unexpected interest and hope for important news. At that moment, he was happy, deciding that this child should never ignore his family, because family ties are important, and one must not forget about those who are always nearby. But when he read the contents of the letter, he was overcome with horror, because it was written in such a way that he understood that in front of him was a damned little bitch, which struck him deeply. So this is how she repaid him for giving her a roof over her head, feeding her, and clothing her, and her gratitude and respect turned out to be just a mask for deception and betrayal. He noticed that the girl had another letter, which she carefully hid. This made him suspicious, and he immediately became interested in what kind of message she was keeping with her in secret from everyone. He demanded an explanation and asked what the letter was and why she was hiding it. His tone was wary, as if he expected to hear something important and possibly dangerous. The girl was confused and did not know what to answer. He insisted that she give him the letter, said it decisively, and pressed the situation so that she could not refuse or hide it any longer. He used force, hit her, took the letter from her hands, leaving her no choice. His actions were harsh and merciless. He wanted to sort out the contents of the message as quickly as possible. Opening the letter, he read the instructions to send a carriage from Tyrone's residence in exactly 3 days. This information clearly meant something, and now he began to understand the girl's plan. He said that he now understood what she had planned, and his gaze became cold and unkind. The secret plan was revealed, and this caused him great irritation. He became extremely angry, clenching the letter in his fist, as if he wanted to tear it apart to destroy all the information and the girl's power over the situation. At this time, the Duke was at a council, where important matters were being discussed. His mood was different from the surroundings. He looked strangely smiling, which was noticed by all those present. The other members of the council could not understand why he was behaving like this. The smile seemed inappropriate and suspicious in such a serious situation. Chief Assistant Keenan, noticing this behavior, apologized for his words, but could not resist admitting that it seemed that His Highness had begun to lose his mind. He apologized again and explained that the Duke had various thoughts constantly swirling around in his head, which prevented him from concentrating and led to strange actions and decisions. The man showed interest, trying to understand if this was related to what had happened earlier, and wondered why this particular question had caught his attention. He believed that the gentleman really wanted to be heard, so he was ready to listen carefully and give his full attention. The gentleman acted this way because he deliberately decided to correct the situation with the help of the middle finger, choosing an unusual way to express his displeasure. He explained his behavior by the fact that his wife strictly recommended that he keep a distance of at least 2 meters from her, which caused him some irritation. She looked so sweet and attractive that the man wanted to kiss her tenderly on the cheek, but her unexpected answer completely changed his intentions. The assistant could not believe his ears when he heard the master claim that he behaved like a real emperor, which seemed incredible. A man who hated physical contact was about to do something similar, which caused him internal resistance and fear. He felt scared at the mere thought that in front of him might be the very Duke he knew well, and feared, which made him nervous. Moreover, the Duke's expression was so serious and unpredictable that the man felt goosebumps all over his body, overcome with excitement. The Duke suggested that it would be a good idea to give the assistant a couple of slaps in the face so that he would come to his senses a little and understand the seriousness of the situation. However, no one could guarantee that the Duke would cope with this, and he also said that there was a report that everyone present must read. The gentleman became interested in the contents of this report and looked carefully at the documents, trying to understand what was important in them. The report concerned Viscount Florence and contained important information that could influence further events and decisions in their circle. The morning in the Florence family began with a difficult situation related to the family debt. The debt appeared due to the advantageous marriage of the daughter, which was supposed to bring money, but now they demand to return it. Apparently, even the Parnell ducal family was facing financial difficulties, which brought them into the spotlight, especially with the annulment, adding to the complexity and tension. He does not understand why at this particular moment they insistently demand the return of the debt. Such behavior seems done with obvious hostility, although the circumstances could have been different and calmer. He thinks that if he were in the Duke of Parnell's shoes, he too might often be angry with people. But it is strange that they never met in person, although it seems they should have. It remains a mystery whether James has any compelling reason for behaving this way. It remains unclear to those around him. The gentleman showed interest in what the Duke would do because there was clearly some hidden secret in this story that they were in no hurry to reveal. Some people thought it would have been better to pay off the debt secretly so as not to attract unnecessary attention. Perhaps she could not tell her husband about it because of her pride. However, the Duke is sure that she is not the kind of woman to hide important matters or be afraid to take responsibility. If pride had prevented her from raising this issue, then she would not have had the courage to so brazenly demand responsibility from him for the incident that had occurred. She had previously warned him not to show any interest in her birth family, believing that contacting them was unnecessary and would lead to nothing good. Her words were decisive and final. She claimed that this kind was not worthy of attention, that contact with them was pointless and dangerous, and that was why she persistently advised to stay away, avoiding any contact with their environment. The Duke could not understand why everyone had such strange expressions on their faces, as if something incomprehensible and tense was happening between them, which left a heaviness and omissions in the air. The assistant remarked that it was surprising because his lordship had managed to create real unity and harmony in the family, which seemed almost impossible in such a difficult situation and environment. This event seemed truly happy and long awaited to them, so unusual that many were convinced that something like this simply could not have happened in their lives before. The thing was that he had always been a man of strong convictions and unshakable will, which is why he decided to ask what was the reason for his sudden change of mind and outlook on the situation. Hearing a street song sung by homeless people, he treated it with slight irony, laughed without paying any attention to it, and walked past, not thinking that it could affect his inner mood. It spoke of a woman who was the instigator, and his first impressions were that she was an overly impudent and self-confident person who did not inspire either respect or trust. But the moment he saw her red eyes, everything in his perception changed. There was something more in them than just rage or anger. She looked at him as if she were his only chance for salvation, and it was this look that inspired the feeling that an important, fateful path was opening up before him. He allowed himself to think that this woman could be the very person who was destined for him by fate and whose appearance could not be ignored under any circumstances. A certainty appeared in his soul that she was the very key person who could change the course of his life and bring all the difficult events to a long-awaited conclusion. The eternally lonely man was in complete shock because he had not expected such a turn of events. For him, everything was happening too quickly, and unexpectedly he was not ready for such changes. The gentleman, wanting to speed up the process, suggested quickly finishing all work matters so as not to be delayed, and free up time for more important matters, which was very practical and clear. After that, he had a date with his wife, and he wanted to get away as soon as possible to give her some attention, prepare for the meeting, and get ready for a pleasant evening. Olivia remained completely perplexed and could not understand what exactly all these things were connected to and why such a hasty scale of events was occurring, which seemed incomprehensible and unexpected to her. Approaching the carriage, she noticed that her husband had prepared himself very solemnly and carefully, as if preparing for an important event. And this surprised her a little, but she did not ask unnecessary questions. The maid had informed her earlier that it was time to go to dinner, and Olivia had taken it for granted, without thinking about what plans were being made that evening. When she was told it was time for supper, she followed downstairs without further thought, led by the maid trusting her words, and not suspecting the upcoming change in plans. Meanwhile, her husband wanted to say that they were going not just to dinner, but on a date, but Olivia did not immediately understand his words, and was surprised that he was asking her to go to such an event in her current form. She explained that she had just come down to have dinner, not thinking about a date, but he assured her that she didn't need to dress up specially because to him she already looked beautiful and elegant enough. Olivia insisted that there were certain standards of decency and that he should wait a little while. She quickly tidied herself up, changed her clothes, and then returned to him. Her husband suddenly decided to go on a date, which came as a complete surprise to Olivia, as she did not expect such spontaneous and decisive actions on his part at that moment. Sometimes his behavior resembled childish stubbornness and spontaneity, which sometimes confused and surprised her, but also added a certain liveliness to their relationship. He hadn't had time to warn yet, because at that moment he was standing behind the door and watching what was happening. His attention was focused because an important event was coming up, and he wanted to control everything. She had already collected her things, and he immediately noticed that she was wearing that same necklace again, brighter and more noticeable than usual, which seemed to emphasize her determination and inner strength. To look like her and emphasize the connection between them, he also wore a blue brooch, which seemed to connect their images and make them a couple despite all the differences. He entered her room and quietly said that it seemed that she was completely ready, that everything had worked out as it should, and now they could calmly move on without being distracted by trifles. Olivia was literally a step away from the exit, and noticing him, he thought that she looked incredibly beautiful, even without all those jewelry and outfits, just natural and confident. And now he wanted to go quickly. He added that in any case, they were heading on a date, because this evening was meant only for the two of them, and there was very little time left to wait. After these words, he tenderly kissed her hand, as if expressing respect and warmth, emphasizing how important this moment and their time together were to him. When they arrived at the place, the gentleman tried very hard to help Olivia get out and go downstairs carefully, showing care and attention to every detail so that she would be comfortable. She smiled and said that apparently there must be very tasty food here since he wanted to come here so much, and it seemed like he had thought about this choice for a long time. The Duke quickly dispelled her thoughts by stating that this was not entirely true, and that there was another reason that prompted him to bring her here. When they got out of the car, Olivia was surprised to notice that this place was not a restaurant at all, but something completely different, which made her wonder about the purpose of their visit. He agreed with her observation and admitted that she was right, adding that she didn't need to dress up at all, because tonight would be special, but not at all what she expected. Olivia, his wife, couldn't understand what was happening right now, and why the situation was developing so strangely. Everything around her seemed incomprehensible, and she didn't know what to expect next at this moment. Apparently, there was a separate room in this place, intended exclusively for important clients. This feeling was created due to the environment and the special treatment that was provided here. He made no secret of his impatience, as he asked Olivia to sit down, as if it were an important and urgent demand that could not be ignored. She didn't understand why they were there at all, and suddenly she noticed that he took her necklace in his hands, which caused her slight surprise and alarm at the same time. He said he noticed that she wore the same necklace every day, as if it was some kind of important observation for him. At the same time, he expressed the desire that she, if possible, wear necklaces bought by him, as if emphasizing his participation in her image. She was surprised that he cared about such a trifle, and he in turn asked if she wouldn't care if he himself wore the same tie every day. What he wanted to explain was that if he were as strangely obsessed with his tie, she would understand his quirks and accept them. Olivia was shocked by these words, and even for a moment was at a loss, not knowing what exactly to say or how to react to this unusual situation. At that moment, a woman approached them, and it was evident that his lordship had honored them with his visit, which gave significance to what was happening. He was accompanied by a female bear, who also found herself part of the event, and although everyone had to dress up, the atmosphere remained tense. She had not seen the Duke for a long time, because a lot of time had passed since their last meeting, and now his appearance seemed to her something unexpected, almost unreal. She explained that the lapis lazuli cuffs had just arrived, and she was just about to contact him to let him know and discuss what to do next. He, trying to apologize, explained that he had come here today, not for himself, but to pick up things for his wife, which was a completely unexpected confession for the girl. Hearing this, she experienced a real shock. Such frankness made her think and feel embarrassed because she had never been told anything like this before. The girl noted his extraordinary sensitivity and tactics, shown in words which caused her sincere respect and even some surprise. She asked from what side they looked at her jewelry and how they felt about it in general, because they were talking about an important necklace that symbolized many things. He replied that he was interested in literally everything connected with her, not missing a single detail, and trying to understand her taste and preferences. Olivia was confused, not knowing how to properly take such attentiveness and desire to please, which made her feel awkward. It seemed as if she had found herself in another world, in another dimension. She was so tired of what was happening and this whole situation. Her husband and this woman constantly chose jewelry for her, as if they wanted to completely control her appearance and surroundings. He thought that jewelry was something normal and familiar to her part of everyday life, and that she would simply accept it without question. But in fact, as they continued to choose more and more new things, she realized that there were completely different scales and ideas about style here. Conversations about some diamonds and expensive stones began to tire her because she did not share such obsessive luxury and attention to detail. After some time, the gentleman announced that all these things should be delivered to his residence and that he would now take care of paying for them. However, Olivia asked him to stop explaining that she could not accept such help and was not ready to take on such obligations, which surprised him. She was categorically unwilling to impose such a burden on him, realizing that it would be too great a burden. It seemed unfair to her to create additional obligations for him that could only complicate the situation. It was really excessive. The number of decorations was so great that she simply could not put them all on at once. Her hands would not be enough to try on this entire rich set. There were so many of them. She decided to limit herself by choosing only a few pieces of jewelry, 3 or 5 at most. This choice seemed more reasonable and appropriate to her, so as not to look overly decorated and to maintain a sense of proportion. She did not listen to the Duke, and insisted that the lady carefully pack all these decorations intended for the Duke's wife. So all the jewelry was collected and put away, so as not to create unnecessary noise and not to attract unnecessary attention. Yesterday, she was in complete shock, not understanding what kind of person this Duke was, and why he was now so stubbornly insisting on his own. For her, his behavior seemed strange and incomprehensible. She could not explain his persistence. He seemed to think that she would just let it go, as if it didn't concern her personally. But she knew that this was a serious matter for her, and she wasn't going to ignore what was happening, especially given the importance of the situation. She wanted him to stop manipulating her and interfering in her life. Today, he had clearly gone too far, crossing all boundaries and making her feel irritated and determined to resist. Suddenly, he grabbed his heart, and this scared her very much. This unexpected gesture made her feel anxious and worried because she did not know what was happening to him and how serious it was. She tried to understand what had happened because he had fallen on his knee, and this had increased her fear even more. She was confused, trying to comprehend what had happened and imagine possible reasons for such a state. She wondered what exactly was wrong with him, assuming that perhaps he was in pain or had suddenly felt unwell. Her thoughts were filled with worry and anxiety for his health. He felt his heart beat faster for a moment, noticing how angry Olivia was at that moment. Her emotions touched him, although he tried not to show it. Because of this, Olivia became even more irritated and tense. Her inner state was noticeable even to strangers. Her anger seemed to grow with each passing minute, giving no rest. She said that she thought he was a fool in response. He apologized for doing everything his own way, without taking into account her feelings and opinion. His words sounded sincere. He understood that he was wrong. At the same time, he expressed the wish that she would always be the most beautiful and luxurious, especially in the place where they were soon heading. It was a kind of compliment and hope. He asked her to trust him and allow him to make the choice for both of them, assuring her that it would be right and best for their future together. Olivia replied that she wanted him to wait and not rush anywhere, but asked him not to touch the floors or objects around him, being careful. Apparently, the necklace had great significance to her and belonged to an important person from her past, which made this item especially valuable. She confirmed that these were indeed her late mother's belongings, which gave the necklace special significance and poignancy. He was very confused when he realized that this was indeed his late mother's necklace, and he experienced mixed feelings, from respect to embarrassment. After some time, they left this place and arrived somewhere else, where he again helped Olivia out of the carriage, showing care and attention. Finally, they arrived at a place designated for a meal, where they could rest and enjoy food after the journey. He noticed that the earrings she was wearing complemented her look very well and suited her appearance, causing Olivia to smile. She looked at him in surprise, as if she had not expected such words, but simply silently accepted this compliment. She then wondered why he decided she should get her hair cut that way, questioning his motives. The guy explained that his attention was drawn to the necklace, which, as she had already said, belonged to her late mother. And this made him think. He felt as if she were very close, as if she were invisibly present here among them. This feeling was so alive that it seemed as if she was about to appear. And this did not give him peace. This gave him a feeling of anxiety, similar to that of a son-in-law when he is about to meet his mother-in-law. This anxiety seemed to grow, making his heart beat faster, although the reasons for the anxiety seemed unclear. He wondered what he had thought of her before, as if he pitied her. Now suddenly changed, he began to act completely differently, and it confused him. It all seemed a little strange, but after she openly confessed, his mood improved dramatically, as if the dark clouds had cleared, and his soul felt lighter. Sometimes he did things that she couldn't figure out his motives for. She said she didn't figure it out, even though she made the earrings the way he asked, fulfilling his requests, despite the confusion. So now he must no longer dare to say that he would buy her anything else. The promise was, as it were, forever accepted and secured. After that, he said that it was time for them to go inside, as if he sensed that the evening was approaching a new chapter and needed to cross the threshold. As they walked down the hallway, their attention was drawn to a girl with bright red hair who seemed to stand out from the rest. The servant addressed the lady and his lordship in a friendly manner, showing respect and emphasizing the importance of those present. He said that he would occupy the room where he usually dined, trying to provide them with comfort and a familiar environment. It was this woman who managed to seduce the nation's eunuch, a mysterious figure who aroused whispers and curiosity. Everyone present looked at her askance, as if they did not trust her or suspected something hidden in her behavior. Their gazes were completely focused on her, but she decided not to give in and simply ignore all those stares, trying to remain calm. As they climbed higher up the stairs, Olivia met the red-haired girl's gaze, and there was something tense about that meeting. The red-haired girl looked at her too boldly, as if challenging her, not hiding her attitude and intentions. The woman they were looking at seemed unusual. There was something different, special in her gaze, as if everything around her was changing because of her. Her manner of looking was different from the usual. This attracted attention and aroused interest. When her body was adorned with beautiful muscles, the looks of those around her became especially intense and attentive. People looked at her differently, with admiration and respect, noting her strength and grace in one appearance. She told her husband that she had become very hungry after a recent shopping trip. This sudden tiredness and hunger made her wish to get to food as soon as possible to replenish her strength and restore her energy. Therefore, she expressed a desire to go faster, to get there sooner, where she could get her fill. Her impatience and desire to speed up were obvious, as if time played a role and did not allow her to linger. He, of course, immediately agreed, responding with a smile and silent agreement. His smile was calm and warm, reflecting understanding and support without unnecessary words, which made the moment between them especially touching. He noticed that she talked about keeping a distance of 2 meters, but she herself almost pressed herself against him, breaking this rule. It was funny and a little contradictory, but it showed her desire to be closer. She repeated again that it was better to go quickly, while looking like a woman with bright red hair who walked with determination and a slight rush. Her beauty and energy were memorable in her every move. After a while, they were already riding home in a carriage, leaving the streets and the bustle, heading for a quiet and cozy place. On the road, there was a feeling of calm and completion, as if the day was coming to an end and a well-deserved respite was coming. Olivia admitted that she was very tired of the constant hustle and bustle, but thanks to her second marriage, she was able to be close to her husband in a sense, and even have dinner with him in a good restaurant. A rare moment of happiness for her. He was truly a good man who cared about her and was willing to pay for anything that would make her happy. His actions showed consideration and respect, which gave her life additional meaning and confidence. Although she was aware of her recklessness and was excited deep down, she felt that he was still a kind person, and this thought softened her inner tension, allowing her to believe in the best. Controlling your feelings and learning to come to terms with them can be difficult at times, but sometimes it takes a special situation that makes you look at everything differently and find inner peace. She said that she had to tell him something important, something that had been troubling her soul for a long time, and required a frank conversation because the accumulated thoughts did not give her peace and required resolution. She also noted that the conversation would be about her younger sister, whose fate and future would become the central topic of their upcoming conversation, which gave the conversation special significance. Olivia realized that she was responsible for her sister's well-being, and she understood that this was not only a family duty, but also a moral one which she was ready to fulfill at any cost. In a broader sense, this meant the need to provide the sister with everything she needed, including sending her to a decent boarding school where she could receive a decent education and protection. She intended to cover all the expenses of her sister's upkeep with the money she received as a duchess, using her position to ensure a decent future for her younger relative. If the sister remains in the Marquis's residence, then she will probably face an unhappy marriage, which could become a real test for her and lead to tragic consequences. Remembering a conversation from the past with her sister Olivia thought about those words where her sister expressed a lack of understanding as to why their fates turned out the way they did, and this memory only strengthened her determination to change everything for the better. Therefore now she is determined not to repeat those mistakes and situations that could harm her sister, protecting her from unnecessary suffering and disappointment. She invited her sister to meet at their mansion in 4 days to discuss all the details and come to an agreement to work out a plan that would help ensure a safe and happy future. She also noted that the Duke might not pay much attention to them, which could play into their hands and help them realize their plans without unnecessary obstacles. She simply felt that it would be better to inform him of this in advance so that there would be no misunderstandings, and so that all important decisions would be made openly and honestly. The gentleman noted that Olivia must clearly understand. Her future husband will be her husband only on paper, without real feelings and obligations, only formally for the sake of appearances. At the same time, he emphasized that it is she who must realize and accept this fact independently, without illusions and expectations, so that false hopes do not arise. At first, she did not immediately understand how serious and unambiguous these words were, and only later did the true meaning of what was said dawn on her, forcing her to think about what would happen next.